Hello everyone, today a very interesting video awaits you. I would like to ask you to support this video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Enjoy watching everyone. The story begins with four people standing on a high mountain. The man, whose name was Tang Xiu, needed to pass the final test, which was called the Devil's Illusion, and then he said he would be able to become immortal. However, for this he needed the help of the fairy Manhwa. The girl assured him not to worry. She and two other people can take care of it. A part of Tang Xiu's soul entered the life in this world and he spent 10,000 years. But now he is one of the immortals in this world. The man turned to Emperor Hing Hu and told him that today was the day of his arrival in the immortal world. And the three who followed him are his friends, including his beloved. The ritual began, in which everyone participated. Tang Xiu was in charge, so the icon was on his back, and his friends were helping, filling him with their power. However, Wanhua's face changed to a mean look. Tang Xiu noticed it but at the last second, so he didn't have time to do anything. And he was pierced by many light rays, from which his clothes began to burn, and he himself was not very pleased with this. Suddenly, a scroll began to appear from his cape. This scroll contained the knowledge of the highest mastery of space. The girl looked at the slipped scroll with interested eyes. Wanhua rushed forward, reaching out to take the knowledge for herself. Tang Xiu cried out in pain and that his so-called friends had done this to him. Holding the scroll in her hands, the girl spoke the following words: that from today, the Hing Hu Emperor will cease to exist, and she, Fairy Wanhua, the Lady of Hu Kane City, will become the Lord of Hing Hu. Tang Xiu was lifted up high, his former friends and loves looking at him like a second son. In the end, he was torn to pieces by the blows, and then he disappeared without leaving behind even a wet spot. In the last notes of his life, he swore that he would not forgive them for their betrayal. How here he opens his eyes, and not somewhere in paradise or in some magical world, but in an ordinary one. His mother asked where he hid her money. From the illusion in the boy's head, the mother thought that something had happened to her son. His relatives gathered around him. His cousin said that trying to pretend that he was dead wouldn't work, and after that he wanted Tang Xiu to tell the truth. Tang Xiu had not yet come out of the state where he had become almost immortal, but he had been vilely killed. But he did not understand where exactly he was. Among the people standing there were his mother Su Lin Yun, uncle Su Shangwen, brother Su Xiang Fei, aunt Zhang Mei Yun. A year ago, Tang Xiu had an accident. Only his soul was wounded, and his body was not harmed at all. A part of the wounded boy's soul went to the immortal world and entered the body of the rich grandson, the leader of the Crimson Bird Saint Church in the immortal world. When he was there, he could not have guessed that such treasonous plans would be hatched against him. After dying there, his soul returned to the ordinary world again. Only a year had passed since the accident. The uncle was divorced and demanded that the boy immediately get the money he hid. The mother interceded for her son, and then, when he stood up, she looked at him with surprised eyes. Tang Xiu stood silently, his face showing no signs of worry. The uncle raised his hand to slap him, saying that Tang Xiu's mother had not taken good care of her son's upbringing, and now he wanted to slap him himself. The mother stepped forward, covering her son with her body, and the hand that was dedicated to Tang Xiu hit Lin Yun. The boy's eyes began to burn from such an act, followed by his fist, which was already flying to meet his uncle's face in order to take care of his upbringing this time. Because his uncle dared to hit his mother, Tang Xiu vowed to kill him. All relatives watched this spectacle. The force of the boy's fist was enough to send the uncle flying to the other side of the room. Little by little, the hand stopped falling, and then eventually went out. Tang Xiu was surprised that he could use the skill, the knowledge in this land. The aunt ran to her husband to see if he was dead. And the brother could not believe that such a weakling as our hero could have such a powerful force. His mother said the boy's name behind his back, and then covered her mouth with her hand. Xiang Fei himself ran to his father and promised that if something happened to him, he would immediately call the police and our hero would pay for everything. However, after a moment, Xiang Fei's eyes changed to one of surprise and fear. In front of him stood Tang Xiu, who did not have the same features in his eyes, let alone his face. This was good news for him, as his goal was to return to the immortal world and take revenge. The police still came to visit them. The uncle was surrounded by policemen, and then a girl leaned over to examine him. Shang Wen was surprised as he had now fully regained consciousness. The woman introduced herself as Police Chief Chen Xiumei and showed her badge. As soon as the uncle opened his eyes, he immediately pointed his finger at Tang Xiu and accused him of stealing 3,000 yuan. And ordered to arrest him. Tang Xiu, of course, denied these words. Chen Xiumei was more interested in who was mocking Shan Wen like that. The boy began to defend himself, explaining that his uncle raised his hand first. Wen began to sneak up on the police chief, saying that he knew the director of this city and that he often dined with him. And this guy, as he went on to say, is just a thief. The boss asked him why he didn't tell the police where their house was. Although at the moment she was sneezed at this information and at his words. She decided on her own what to do in this situation. At that moment, the boy felt sick, and he remembered that using the sacred technique in the real world was very difficult. His current weak body simply could not withstand such loads. The boss saw what was happening with the boy. Blood began to flow from his mouth. She walked over to Tang Xiu and placed 2 fingers on his carotid artery. By some miracle, the blood stopped flowing from his mouth and the boy got better. Chen Xiumei was somehow able to analyze that the cause of the bleeding was the result of internal damage, but now, after her magic fingers, everything should be fine. After such treatment, the chief asked to tell what happened. Brother Xiang Fei began to tell with a hideous face that today was his dad's birthday and his cousin and aunt had come to eat. He then said that 2 days ago, the institute informed them that Xiang Fei and Tang Xiu had to pay 3,500 yuan to continue their studies. And as he assured, Tang Xiu did not pay them. Xiang Fei had such money, he showed 3,500 yuan and left it in his room, and when he returned, it was gone. However, he did not have time to tell his story completely, he was interrupted by the chief. She wanted to know if he had any evidence. Chen Xiumei has already started to talk herself, why exactly it turned out like this and under what circumstances. Xiang Fei began to sweat from his forehead, he put his hand on his heart and said that he only suspected him. The boss explained that if they invested them, then they still need to conduct an investigation, and asked everyone to keep their mouths shut. 30 minutes have passed since the last conversation. Everyone was in the waiting stage, but they didn't have to wait long. The money was found by one police officer. A shoe print was found with the money. Chen Xiumei didn't want to work too hard on this investigation, because it was meager, but instead said that the person who did it should confess herself, and if not, then the prints were already there. Uncle Shang Wen thought it was some kind of misunderstanding. At this moment, Xiang Fei shouted from behind the uncle, who admitted that it was his doing, as he explained it was a joke, and he did not think that he would enter such a deep stage. The boss pointed her index finger at the boy and called him a thief. The uncle began to invent an explanation that it was not a theft at all, they just hid the money themselves, and then forgot where they put it, so as not to receive a fine for a false call. And he also mentioned his relationship with Director Deng and asked that this situation be forgotten. At that time, Mei Yun's aunt was already sneaking up on Lin Yun so that this day would be forgotten. Now that he had seemingly resolved his problems with the police, he returned to Tang Xiu's mother. He boasted of his people who could easily kick her son out of high school. However, Lin Yun's patience had run out, and now she slapped his cheek with her hand. The uncle did not expect this, and the boy laughed so loudly that he covered his face with his hand, and then praised his mother. However, the happiness passed, and the boy flew straight down to the floor. Lin Yun rushed to help him, and then the chief herself too. His mother did not have time to catch him, but Chen Xuemei managed to do it. To her surprise, such a thin guy was quite heavy. Tang Xiu put him on the floor. This time the magic fingers did not help. Shay ordered all police officers to arrest her and call 911. After checking her pulse, she couldn't believe it. After today's incidents, the boy was lying at midnight in the hospital in room 403. His mother was sitting next to him. She looked pitifully at her son. At this moment, Tang Xiu had a dream that made him frown. He had a dream about himself and about some magical deities. One of them is the sacred heaven, and the other is the earth of the devil. Quan and Kun were vindicated, and God and devil were separated. It was a balance between yin and yang. Then the dream talked about the practice of the divine technique of the origin of the cosmos. It was an ideal technique that could be practiced by both demons and gods. This requires the practitioner to have a very weak mind and body before starting the practice. When Tang Xiu was in another world, he was powerful, so he could not practice it. However, his body is now very weak and he must abide by the conditions. The boy remembered how in the immortal world he was betrayed by his friends and his beloved woman. His stomach began to tear at these thoughts. He woke up and started screaming. Then, all sweaty, he saw his mother in front of him. She asked him what was wrong, and Tang Xiu assured her that he was fine. Lin Yun was happy to hear this. Getting up, she put her hand on her son's forehead. As it turned out, he had a fever, so she went to get cold water. Tang Xiu began to monologue in his head. A weak body will not be able to help the star energy that the technique will bring. The first level of the divine technique does not train the body. First you need to start with the breath, skin, bones and so on. In the worst case, if you collect too much energy, then his body can simply tear apart. His thoughts were interrupted by his mother, who asked him to undress so that she could rub him. Tang Xiu was excited because he is already an adult and can do it himself. The mother did not want him to do this and said that she was his mother and he was her child. She saw every part of his body. Our hero agreed with this. While rubbing her son's back, Yun said that the doctor told her that nothing happened to our hero's body. She asked how he was feeling at the moment. From the moment he coughed up blood, he got better. The mother was worried about her son, because he could be kicked out of high school for such a blow to his uncle. Tang Xiu reassured her with a tug on his shoulder, saying that he would not cause them any trouble. And he is also happy that she herself is in order. These words brought tears to Yun's eyes. The boy extended his hand to her. The mother asked how he could now express his feelings like that. However, Su assured her not to worry anymore. He will become the best of the best. During these 10,000 years, he saw his own mother again. He swore to protect her and the family. The next day, the high school where Tang Xiu studied distributed the test results of the previous week. The boy was surprised by his very low grades. The part of his soul that remained on earth was not only weak, but also very stupid. He wondered what this particle had been doing all this year. While Tang Xiu was looking at his results, a student sneaked up on him from behind. Meanwhile, in the principal's office, Xuemei was telling her father about Tang Xiu's boyfriend, saying that he was not normal. She checked his pulse with a technique her father had taught her. He had really serious injuries. The director needed her to continue. She continued, but not so vigorously that after the boy passed out, she saw that his pulse had become abnormally strong and the internal wounds had disappeared. Even the doctor was surprised because such wounds cannot disappear so quickly. The father asked if she had made a mistake. Then she changed from a calm tone to a higher one and told him that how could she be wrong in such a trivial matter. However, at one point, Xayumi realized that her father was not interested in listening to her story. She left the office taking a bottle of wine. But her purpose in this conversation was to heal her inner wound. When Xiaomei left the office, that's when her father became curious about Tang Xiu. Meanwhile, we flash forward to the moment when a giant figure appears from behind Tang Xiu. She wanted to grab him, but Su managed to react and moved to the side. The student grabbed the air and hit the chair with his balls. Su put his hand over his face to avoid seeing this disgrace as his friend screamed in pain. The other's name was Yang Chuling. Ian praised his boss, as he called him, for his agility and responsiveness. Su asked if he was all right. Yang was fascinated by how colorful Su's test was. The boy promised that he would be number 1 in the exam next month. His friend did not believe his words, because he has no chance to match the stronger ones. Their conversation was interrupted by Professor Hu ordered Tang Xiu from another part of the classroom to leave as soon as possible. Yang didn't understand why he had to leave, they hadn't done anything yet. Su took Yang aside so that he wouldn't say anything, and asked Professor Hu what happened. The reason for the expulsion was to transfer him to another class, because they do not need such a student. And in order for everything to go smoothly, the professor gave an ultimatum that if he did not leave the class, he would simply be kicked out of the institute. Everyone in the class wanted Tang Xiu to leave the class. Yan could not stand this attitude towards his friend and took the chair in his hands. And then he hit the desk with it, saying that when his boss becomes the first on the course, then no one will dare to say anything. The professor could not allow him to speak such nonsense that his mouth was drooling. However, Su did not want to throw wood into the fire and asked Yang to do his homework, while he took his briefcase and went to the exit. At the exit, a professor was waiting for him with an offer to leave the institute, because, in his opinion, he would save his time and his family's money this way. As he left the office, Tang Xiu crumpled up the letter and threw it at the professor, saying that he would soon regret it. Jan supported him. The professor was outraged by the comment from Ian. He would have kicked him out long ago, too, if it weren't for his parents. However, these words, or more precisely what Professor Hu mentioned about his parents, made Yang not smile, and he picked up the desk. But it wasn't an attack on a person with a desk, it was just that Yang wanted to leave with Tang Xiu, so he took his desk with him. The professor was very horrified by Yang's antics, even Su called him a freak. That's how Tang Xiu transferred to another class with his weirdo friend Yang. Professor Hu received a call from Uncle Shang-Wan. He wanted to know how everything went. The professor answered with a tremor in his voice that it was not very good. Tang Xiu couldn't be kicked out because the 10th grade teacher Hai Qingwu told the headmaster to give the boy a second chance. And now he was transferred to her class. The headmaster, of course, agreed that Tang Xiu would stay in the 10th grade, but under some conditions. In front of the door to another class, the class teacher was already waiting for them, extending his hand to say hello. The leader turned out to be a beautiful woman whose beauty made Yan's nose bleed. But Tang Xiu was not into love. This woman was very similar to his companion in the immortal world. Because of this, he seemed to fall under the ground. The boy could not believe his eyes, because every feature of the leader's face was exactly the same as Manhwa's. Already during the lesson in the class in which she taught the Kyunghwa lesson, she told the students that they need to use the passive tense as well, because everything can be on the exam this year. Therefore, she suggested reading all topics in all subjects. Suddenly she turned her gaze to the newcomer in the class. She remembered the incident in the corridor when they first met. Tang Xiu took her hands and started shaking her, asking her why she kept talking to him like that. Yang stopped Su from doing an incomprehensible act, and he succeeded. He entered the classroom as both Kyungwoo and Yang remained in the hallway. Yen at that moment began to apologize for his friend, saying that he is not usually like that and this is the first time this has happened to him. Qingwu shed tears and said that Su knew everything. These words gave Yen nothing. While the class teacher was handing out textbooks to everyone, all the boys looked at her with loving eyes, except for Sue. He thought about the fact that maybe he was mistaken and they are just somehow similar to each other. However, those words she said at the end did not leave him. In any case, his main task was education. Although looking at the pages of the book, he did not understand anything. Although, if he returned to the earthly state, then his sense of immortality should remain there. And that should be enough for him. And so it helps him. Now, just looking at the pages, they remain in his memory, like files on a disk. Yang and the others were surprised by Sue's eagerness to learn. The others, except Ian, did not support this and said that he had gone mad. The boy reread hundreds of school books. Sometimes, he abused it, and in some classes he read textbooks on other subjects while everyone was walking and having fun. And Ian slept like that. Even during the breaks, Tang Xiu gained knowledge when his friends stared at the girls. In order to gain more knowledge, he came to the library and read already there. Ian found this activity boring, so he just left. Task completed, Tang Xiu read and memorized all the information for the university entrance exams with the help of his strength. With relief in his heart, the boy took the books away and began to arrange them on the shelves, as he notices a book called the Encyclopedia of Xiangcheng. From there, he learned that Xiancheng was a star city that had medicine that would help Tang Xiu with the first level of cultivation. With this, his body will become more effective in dealing with the side effects of the divine technique. After reading further, the boy learned that this medicine was found in the mountains around Xiancheng. If you believe the words of Feng Shui, the mountains have a spiritual basis, which was simply an ideal place for cultivation. Su was thinking about how much money he should get to buy the land and pay for the construction, and this is not even counting the materials that will be needed for cultivation. He closed the book and took a deep breath, and then said that the earth is a materialistic world, and a lot of things will be needed first. However, his philosophical thoughts were interrupted by a phone call from his mother. But taking the call on the other side of the line, it was not his mother who spoke, but Tia Zhang, a neighbor. Kotra gave him the bad news and told him to go home as soon as possible, because the restaurant in their house had been destroyed. After finishing these words, the boy dropped everything and ran quickly. As soon as he ran out to the front of the school, he was met by Jan, who asked if he had finished reading. However, worrying about Sue's mother was the most important thing at the moment, so he ran without seeing him. Yen was not offended by this, because he understood that something very bad had happened to him. At this time, Lin Yun was lying in the restaurant, just like the broken doors and tables. Towering over her were three guys who didn't look like customers. One of the bandits was armed with a bat. He looked up and down at the boy with a dominant smile. He praised Lina Yun that her son was still such a tough nut. Yun told them that the owner was always kind to them. Therefore, he reduced the price for the rent and there was a delay of 3 days. She did not understand why they came. The main one was pissed at that, the two of them had to pay now, and if she couldn't pay, she'd fly out of nowhere. From these words, Su did not continue to lie down and began to rise little by little. His mother removed him, but his stubbornness proved stronger. The chief pointed his bat at him, asking if Su wanted more. The boy took this bat with one hand. The bandit was even surprised by his seriousness. Su had enough strength to take the bat away from his opponent. He used divine power and delivered a crushing blow with his fist. His comrades also rushed into the fight after the defeated man. Su dealt powerful blows to each of the enemies. One managed to get up from behind, but the boy's agility would not allow him to strike from behind. Therefore, our hero used a kick to the body for him. From such a blow, the man flew to another part of the room. Everyone else was also not happy about such an event. Some moaned and even coughed. Only Su and his mother stood in the middle of the restaurant. The leader of the gang, barely breathing from the blows, began to threaten Su. That he doesn't even know who he contacted. They were sent here by Su Shangguan of the Su Real Estate Agency. According to him, our boy was already dead. The boy did not listen to him, so he scared the head very much with his look, and reached for his neck with his hands. And he did not understand what the boy would do now. Everything was simple, he lifted him by the neck. With the help of divine power, of course, he began to squeeze his neck with both hands. One of the gang began to help free himself from Su's grasp. However, as soon as the boy looked at him with his merciless gaze, this idea immediately disappeared. The third acted more wisely, he turned to Lin Yun and asked what she wanted her son to become a murderer. The mother asked to let the chief go. However, Su only wanted one, because in his opinion they had already suffered enough from them. Su became angrier and angrier. In his opinion, neither he nor anyone else cares what happens to them. As someone's hand reached out to the boy, and this hand was not from someone from the gang. It was January. The boy was confused by his appearance. Jan dissuaded him from killing the scoundrel, because if he did, he would be imprisoned and no one would care about his mother. These words helped, Ian articulated and used them well. Su let go of his throat and he fell to his knees in front of our hero, coughing. However, he was not very happy with the savior, and even called him a fat man. But when he recovered, he could not believe his eyes. While standing on his knees, he recognized the boy as being from the Yang family by poking a finger at him, but the boy himself did not pay attention to it. The main thug began to apologize to him, explaining that they were just subordinates of his uncle. They got a tip from a stranger and wanted to make some extra money, but they didn't know that this restaurant was his friend, so they begged for forgiveness. Yen did not forgive them, and kicked the leader. And then he ordered them to find the funds to restore the store in 3 days, and after that they should disappear from the city. The chief agreed with his proposal. They had had enough for today, so Yang ordered all thugs to disappear from this restaurant. They could barely do it. Already leaving the battlefield, Su stopped them. He didn't trust them, so he wanted to do something for his safety. The guy hit them at vital points and then threatened them that if they didn't return with the money in a maximum of 3 days, they would learn the consequences of not completing the task. At that point it was all over, so Ian put a big stop to it by yelling at the scoundrels to disappear. Su thanked his friend for his help. Our hero asked where his mother was, and she was perfectly fine, but very frightened. However, her first question was whether her son was okay. The guy asked why she didn't pay the rent this month. The problem was that the money was 3,500 yuan. They went to Xiu's training. That was the reason why she didn't pay the rent. She has already tragically begun to inflate this situation. But her son reassured her, assuring her that everything would be fine. While there was a family interview between two people. Behind them, rubbing his face, Yang admitted that it was hard to keep such a serious expression and tone of voice. Yun thanked him for his help and offered him some beef. It was a sin to refuse such a thing, so Jan even wanted to help in the preparation. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening and Yang and Su were walking through the dark streets. Yang marveled at his martial arts skills, and wanted to know when his boss would teach him how to use his fists in the same way. However, it was surprising for Su to learn that Yang was from some high-ranking family. Su thanked him again for his help today. He appreciated his feat. However, Jan said that the boss thinks highly of him. And then he asked Su if he remembers their first meeting. In those days, his classmates mocked him, saying how good it is to be from a rich family, because with such grades, which he had, it was impossible to get into the best college. Then a textbook came to one of them's head. The one who threw the book was Tang Xiu. He said that they were not from wealthy families. He asked them the question of who gets the best grades. They did not answer him. Yang still remembered that moment in every detail. Even, what Su said then, "I am a person who knows how to thank." Yang asked Su not to be shy. If the boss has any financial problems, he will always be happy to help him with this problem. But asking for money was not for Su. But instead, he had a question for the millionaire's son. Was it possible to win a large amount of money quickly? This was only achievable through the lottery, as Ian suggested. It was just like that at that moment they were passing by the casino. And the boy showed Su what he needed here. The two of them were standing in a steep stall looking at the window of the casino when the door soon swung open and a soft female voice said that she was waiting for their return. These words were addressed to three guys who were leaving the casino. One of them was Su's brother, Su Xiangfei. She was both surprised to see them together. Meanwhile, in the middle of the casino, in the gaming hall, there were many people and each of them was playing on the machine trying to win money. One such person, according to him, lost money. If he knew how to place bets, he would definitely win, so he thought. His butler distracted him from his extravagance. He wanted to invite him to go and look at the guy who won all the time. That lucky guy was Tang Xiu. Many people gathered around him, and his every action was victorious. Dvoretsky said that no matter which car he gets into, he will win something in each one. Despite the fact that they reduced the chances of victory yesterday. And the man did not have time to prove how Su won again. Money was already pouring over the top of the trays. Ian was as emotional about his winnings as if they were his own. As soon as a hand rested on his shoulder, she knew him. It was the same guy. He was glad to see Ian again, because it had been many years since the last meeting. Yang wondered what he was doing here. His appearance in this casino could be easily explained. It was his casino. At the moment when Su and Yang were just entering the casino, they ran into Xiangfei. Su then said that he would pay for everything he and his relatives had done to his family. Xiangfei wondered how he would make him pay. He took his phone out of his pocket and called 110. He turned to Wei and told him that he had seen two students at the casino. In China, it was a violation if a high school student. And so be it. If this casino is his, then all the money must be paid to the last penny, so said Ian. The boy assured them that if after checking the cars they are in good condition, then everything will be like that. Su hurried him with this work, because they wanted to leave soon. Dvoretsky checked the working capacity of the devices through a program on a laptop. And unfortunately, there was bad news for the boy. They were all in perfect condition. He simply could not believe such words, so he wanted to check himself, and a little bit of encouragement. The figures fell into the ground, and Su asked if they were done yet. As he promised, he will give all the money won today, and then he asked if Jan was his friend. He was amazed that such a child could win with such low odds. Their conversation is interrupted by the police. Among them was an acquaintance, Shei Chen-Shuame, who introduced herself and told everyone that the premises were being inspected due to the fact that there were high school students in the casino, so everyone should stay in their seats. Su and Yang were very excited about this. But the casino owner knew a way to get them out, so they quickly ran. This group of three people was easy to spot, so Xayumiai gave herself the job of catching them. She ran to the door through which they were escaping, opened it and said hands to the mountain. But there was no one in the room after Xayumiai opened it. They slipped out through the window. As she ran towards the door, she noticed a face, and recognized it as Tang Xiu, but for now, it was only guesses. Meanwhile, a group of boys successfully escaped and were already driving a car. Yang, of course, thanked for the help, but the owner should not forget about the payouts for Su's victories. He insulted him with such words, because he is a man of his word. After asking Su if it was his first time to win such a large amount of money. And then, without waiting for an answer, he offered an offer. Su can get a big bet, right now. He wins a lot of money whether he wins or loses. If Su loses, he will receive 10 million, and if he wins, he will receive 100 million. The boy smiled and said what they were waiting for. Yang was happier than Su at such an offer, but the bet was a business secret, so he couldn't be there. And then the owner of the casino stepped on the gas pedal and said that he would reincarnate a little today. Ian was not pleased that he would not go with them. In the city of Sin, namely in the hotel of the Long family, they played cards in the apartment. A man on one side of the table asked Boss Long if they should continue playing. The man got another card win, so that was the end of the game. As a result of the loss, and according to the contract, Boss Long must give up the right to build Zhai Shangping and instead let Zhang Deqin go. The woman behind Jia Ruidao told Long to give up as soon as possible, because he could not defeat the man's skill. However, Jia Ruidao offered to play another game of cards, which angered Boss Long. The woman asked if Long Zhenggu was okay. Is it worth it for them to keep playing further? And behind them came a voice that yes, they must continue. Boss Long turned his head back. Su and Jingling burst into the room, the latter saying that he would not let his family win so easily. Boss Long was surprised at his appearance. Zhenglin explained to him that the person he brought with him was his friend who would help with the current situation. They were just in time, because they arrived at the last moment. Su wanted to start work as soon as possible. But Long instead, in order to seat the boy at the table, asked Zhenlin to step aside for a moment and talk. Boss Long put 2 hands on his shoulders and thanked him for his help, but this situation was very serious. Zhenglin assured him that he understood the importance of the case, and whoever he had brought would help solve it. Still, Long gave in and let Su get down to business. Zhenglin asked to choose a game. He offered to roll the dice, and whoever had the higher number would win, and if Su won 1, it would mean Jia's defeat. Su asked the man to start first. Jia put the cubes in the jar and started shaking. Su memorized his every move. The man relied not only on his hands, but on all his senses. Now Su also started shaking the dice. He used the same technique that Jia used. He was shocked by this, because it was enough for the boy to see the equipment once, and remember it accurately. Our hero had 3 sixes just like Jia, which meant that it was a draw. Su proposed to change the rules. In the next games, they will add 1 cube per game to make the game more interesting. Jia laughed a little confused. He was impressed that such a small child knew how to have fun, so he accepted such changes. Jia placed his jar of dice on the table. He wanted to know exactly how the boy wanted to win him. Picking up the jar, there were 3 sixes. Then the second party went. There were already 4 dice and a draw again. So batch by batch, cube by cube. Jia asked the boy if he still wanted to continue. Su said he didn't understand a lot of things, so he gave the man the choice. Instead he wanted him to tell him the rules. The woman began to stir up the situation again about the contract and the right to build in the Zhai Shiping zone. For a moment, Su remembered the exact place this woman was talking about, the one he had read in the library. Zhenglin was tired of explaining briefly who it was, and Long Zhenbugu was his brother. On their side was an employee, General Director of Bade, Chen Zhizhong. The opponent was known as the betting king Jia Ruidao. Once he invited the CEO of Zhangshi, Zhang Deqin and her brother Zhang Yongqin. The game has stretched to the point where both players are already rolling 12 dice. Su wanted to get this over with as soon as possible because he was short on time. Jia agreed to this. In his mind he recognized him as a young genius, and wanted to meet him after the game, because he needs people like Su. And after our hero and Jia rolled the dice and raised the pots, the numbers sang again. This made the man laugh. Jia recognized Su's abilities. However, he was interrupted by a woman saying that he was saying that because the winner had not yet been determined. Master Jia's numbers were 11 sixes and 5s. Zhenglin began to count Su's dice and stopped at the number 9 sixes. They shook hands. Jia told Chief Zhang that the money for the game would be waiting in the bank account while he was going on vacation. The woman thought to herself about the old madman. After changing the rules and losing the bet, he still has the nerve to talk about payment. However, everyone began to say goodbye, and finally Master Jia asked the boy what his name was. He introduced himself by his full name, Tang Xiu. CEO Bade was a bit shocked when he heard the boy's name. The boy asked if it matched his title as king of the bets on today's game. Jia eventually let Su win. The guy thought that he had done it according to the plan so that they would be in debt. Boss Long raised his glass of wine and said it was good to make new acquaintances, and thanked him for what he had done for all of them. Xiu refrained from thanking him, because he was simply paid for this work, and he had completed the assigned task. Zhenglin called him not just a friend, but Tang's brother, and promised that if Su had any problems in Xian City, the Long family would take care of everything. Just then Uncle Chen starts coughing. Su analyzed Chen with his gaze, and after he stopped coughing, Brother Tang told him that he could not take such medicine. The man was surprised. He asked the boy how he found out about the medicine. The hero said that even the first time when Chen was near him, he smelled this smell. He further explained that the drugs he uses relieve pain from internal wounds, but their effect is very great. Therefore, Su said that if Chen continued to take them, he would only make his wounds worse. Chen just smiled a little and clinked his glass, saying that the boy magically knows what kind of people provide this kind of medicine. Su explained that those with minor internal injuries would be helped, but in this case his internal wounds were incurable, but the boy could try to heal them. Chen just laughed at his suggestion, and then with a serious face began to tell that he had traveled all over the world and found only these medicines that could at least relieve the pain. He doubted Su's skills. But he assured the man that there is always a mountain higher than the previous one. Su didn't waste any time, so he swung his hand, which was burning with blue flames, and quickly hit Chen's chest with it, causing his mouth to bleed. Chen fell to his knees in front of everyone. His back was burning with blue flames, he was still coughing up blood. Long and Zhenglin were nervous that the former was already calling for help. But it wasn't long before Chen got up from his knees and felt much better. Su promised to give a prescription that Chen would have to take for several days. The boy managed to discover the problem of his illness. It arose during qi purification. Chen wondered how he knew and who he even was. Su said the prescription would not be free. If Chen only wanted Su to try out his recipe, he would have to pay 1 million, and to get completely cured, he would have to pay 10 million. Su promised that he would monitor the disease. The man remembered that blow, it was worth it. Chen asked Long to bring Su 10 million. However, Su turned out to not need 10 million, but he also asked for something in return. He described a place in the south of Zhaishanping that he wanted to use for his own purposes. Boss Long thought for a while, but agreed to the proposal, but said that this area was not yet developed, and it was very far away. He wanted to know what kind of help Brother Tan would need. The hero was full of joy and asked for a simple piece of paper to begin with. Su quickly sketched a traditional Chinese mansion. Everyone was surprised, because in about 5 minutes he was able to draw such a detailed and high-quality drawing. Long assumed that if everything was built according to the blueprint, then this mansion would become a show place. Zhenglin asked if Su was using any cheats. Long wanted to get this drawing. Su didn't mind, if Long needed it, he could take it at will. Long said he would definitely give him 10 million and Su could live in his mansion near Zhaishanping while waiting for the construction to be completed. Our hero agreed with Long, so he offered a ride to the mansion right now. Brother Tang was not against it. They were driving in a black limousine at night. Su texted his mother on his push-button phone that he was going to bed early. After sending the message, he was disturbed by Long. He handed him his reward, a bank card and a new phone, much better than his current one. Su thanked him for that. Long wondered what he was thinking about. Su wondered how he does business and whether he has questions that interest him. Long told the first direction of the market. It was aimed at women and children, so it was the most important. Brother Tang had many recipes that touched on aging and skin care. Long didn't think this boy could have so many recipes. He agreed to help Su in this area on one condition, if of course Su would not mind. Su told Chief Long that he didn't need to say anything more, he would let him invest 100 million. Su guessed what Long wanted to say, so he would in turn prepare everything the boy would need. First, Su needed a specialist in business administration. Zhenglin responded to this commitment. Long asked the boy what obligations the staff had to fulfill. Su said that everything is clear, which is the best. At this time, Chen was sitting on the sofa in the room and was looking at Su's recipe. He could not believe that drugs could be prepared in this way. The door opened, it was the man's daughter. He was glad she was back already. His daughter was the police chief of Shumei. She was surprised why her dad was still awake, but today was not an easy day for her, so she went upstairs and ordered Chen not to drink at night. After that, he thought about Tang Xiu again. Meanwhile, 3 persons have already arrived at their destination. Long told Su that he could stay in the mansion as long as he wanted. The boy thanked and accepted his kindness. Long will return home, and in the morning another person will pick him up and take him to school. Zhonglin promised Su that he would visit him when he had free time. After all the talk, they left. The boy was now left alone. There was a lot of spiritual energy around Shanshamping. He began meditating near the house, taking off his suit. But he suddenly felt a burst of powerful spiritual energy that interrupted his meditation. After 20 minutes, Su left the house and followed the powerful spiritual energy. What he saw amazed him. In his field of vision was a giant snake, which was entangled in some kind of red sphere. Su did not know that such bloodthirsty beasts of the true Yuan level could exist on Earth. In any case, Su planned to take this power for himself. Of course, the beast didn't want to give it up so easily, so it rushed into battle and showed its teeth with poison. Su managed to parry the snake's attack and dodge. Then, turning around, he struck another blow in the area almost near the head. After the beast tried to strike Su with its tail, realizing it was futile, it used its poison and injected it into the boy. After that, the beast simply disappeared, and then suddenly appeared behind the boy. The creature managed to envelop Su with its long body, as pythons do with their prey. Su's current body couldn't compete with this beast's strength, so he needed to get rid of it as soon as possible. He used the power of the immortal world. With his fist, he tore the flesh of the beast, it began to scream in pain. He fell to the ground and began to breathe heavily, and Su, who was standing on top, was angry. He said that the real Yuan would take him. Already walking back to the house, the boy felt an inexplicable smell. He came from a broken tree like a snake. In the hemp were the valuable herbs of Shanshamping. As our hero assumed, these were the creature's reserves for cultivation. He killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Even though the snake was already dead, the boy promised him that he would use his body for 100%. 2 days have passed since the encounter with the snake. Su came to his mother's restaurant and saw those who had destroyed him there. They were rebuilding him as promised. The boss entered the restaurant and ordered his men to work harder, and then Su grabbed his shoulder. The chief was surprised by the appearance of Tang Gu. Su asked where his mother was. One of the subordinates of the gang said that she went to the supermarket. The boy called them to follow him. He released them from supervision knowing the acupuncture points that he had set at the first meeting. And then the boy ordered them to finish their work quickly, and they could be free. The gang was a little worried about something. They bowed to him and said that they wanted to be Su's subordinates. The chief talked about the pain from the tags, which kept them all awake. The boy's skills amazed them, so they wanted to learn his skills, and work for something more serious than smashing restaurants. Our hero said that learning skills from him will be a difficult task, but if they work for good, then this option can be considered. Sue told the boys to stay as far away from his mother's shop as possible for now. If he needs the boss, he will call him. The guy gave him a bank card and said that if the store needed anything, he would take care of it. And said one philosophical quote, "If they do something bad, pain is not the only thing that will await them." It's been a week since the monthly test. One of the students in the 10th grade shouted that the tests will be announced today. Everyone looked at their report cards. Ian didn't like his grades. Therefore, I wondered if they would be tall at his brother's. Jan approached our hero and asked what his score was. As it turned out, the boy did not even receive his report card. At that time, one of his classmates told him that the director was calling him to his office. Tang Xiu walked into the office, the director, his supervisor, and professor who were there. Sue asked what the matter was. And within moments, Professor Hu started yelling and accusing him of cheating on the test. The boy told him to watch what he said and not say any nonsense. His homeroom teacher began to defend Sue, telling that the boy has been studying very hard lately and goes to the library after classes. She turned to him to look into his eyes, but he turned away from her. The director said that Professor Hu wanted to check his work again, because he almost got a higher grade. The principal added to his opinion that if Sue did cheat on the test, he would have to leave the school according to the rules. Our hero accepted the challenge and said that he would write another test under the supervision of Principal and Professor Hu. However, if they verify that he is not a fraud, then Mr. Hu will have to answer for his words. Hu was angry at this attitude towards him, so he made a promise that if Sue wrote one more test for a higher grade, he would immediately resign. The boy agreed to this offer and said to call him when the test was ready, and went to other classes. The manager also had to go to the lessons. The director let her go. Walking down the corridor, his supervisor caught up with him. She asked him to stop, and then asked him if he had ever thought about the consequences of getting kicked out of school if he wrote a test with a low grade. Sue was in all seriousness, so he was responsible for his words. Memories from the immortal world began to haunt the boy again. The manager could not understand what was the matter, how then Sue reached out to her with his hand. He held her close, took her by the waist and kissed her. The teacher was stunned by this. For this, of course, she pushed him away from her and slapped him on the cheek, and asked if he was out of his mind. Sue was still in that world. Therefore, he began to say that she should pay him for everything. She was surprised, and then began to say something strange about the fact that the truth is not like that. She wouldn't have left him there if those people weren't following her. And after that the teacher burst into tears. Sue could not understand what she was talking about. When she calmed down, she continued her story. While her father was involved in a crime, she collected all the evidence of the criminals. She was also seen with them. Then she was hunted by men in black. She was lucky that there were many people outside and managed to hide behind one high-rise building as they continued to comb the perimeter. She ran and crossed the road on a red light. Someone even shouted to her to be careful. A white car was coming to meet her, as if out of nowhere someone ran to help her, when she just stood there and screamed hysterically. The guy rushed under the car, instead of it, but, most of all, this could not be done, because the driver managed to press the brakes in time. This boy was Tang Xiu, and this very story is the beginning of his separation of soul and body. He was lying on the road with a broken head, on which a large amount of blood flowed. However, Kyungwoo couldn't do anything as she was spotted by the men in black from the crowd. She ran, asking the boys forgiveness in her head and ran. After this incident and after the teacher's life improved, she learned that Sue had fallen into a coma. She told this story with tears in her eyes. Then when Sue woke up from his coma, Kyungwoo got an opportunity to work as a teacher at school thanks to her father. As she predicted, it was because of the car accident that the boy had gaps in his school records. The teacher tried all means to prevent Sue from being expelled from the school. So she wanted to atone for her guilt. At that time, our hero thought that it was because of her that he died in the immortal world, but instead he got there thanks to her. He was interested in life without this turning point. The teacher apologized to him and promised that she would negotiate with the principal and he would not expel the boy from the school. Sue walked up to the teacher and walked past her as he continued down the hall. He told her to trust him and in case of forgiveness, he would think about it. The teacher was still standing still and understood her guilt. As at this time, Sue understood that there was no need to run away from her, because she was not the one who betrayed and killed him. The end of the day has come. Sue was in his villa, preparing some kind of potion in a large cauldron. It seemed like he was some kind of witch. All the ingredients have been gathered, they should help the boy practice the first level of immortality enchantment. He lay down in a boiling cauldron and began to meditate. As a result, his soul went to another world. Far from the real thing. As he noticed something here, it was something very familiar to him. A blue beam of light hit him straight in the stomach. Sue began to scream in pain. This one beam was followed by others. Each of them directly hit the same place, the stomach. Meanwhile, at the house of the Long family, the boy was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine and remembered the moment when Sue said that he wanted the best. He agreed with this. As he is alone, his thoughts are interrupted by a butler who announces that Mr. Chu has come to see him. He asked him why he was drinking alone. The reason he was here was that Long once asked him to find a manager. Therefore, he brought one person. This manager was a woman, Kang Xia, a well-known professional manager from Wall Street. They both shook hands. She was very pretty. Chu wanted to know exactly what Long wanted to do with the manager. But he disappointed them, because it is not he who needs a manager, but his comrades. Chu wondered who could have asked Mr. Long Tycoon Xincheng for help in finding a manager. Long calmly replied that this person was an 18-year-old boy. Chu thought he was joking, because it couldn't be. He offered to talk to the guy on the phone, because he needed a person with such a specialty. Ms. Kang Xia agreed to this kind of conversation. Long picked up the phone and started calling Tang Xiu. The beeps went one after the other, but for some reason he did not pick up the phone. It turns out that at this time our hero was still cultivating. He was still being pierced by hundreds of beams, making him stronger and stronger. His eyes began to glow. After this type of meditation, the cauldron in which he bathed was broken. Sue still heard the phone ring. Long was glad the boy picked up the phone. He informed him that he had found a manager and wanted him to speak to him on the phone. Kang Xia now got the earpiece into her hands. She introduced herself and what she does, just like in her favorite job interview. Sue asked if she had any requirements. She had many offers, but she didn't care about money. Her work, as she said, should be interesting to her. Sue explained that she would run the company, and he, in turn, would not put in his oar. For his part, he will provide a product prototype and capital. The girl was shocked by his words. The boy continued to tell his plan. If the company is successful, Kang Xia will receive 5% of the shares. He sat down in a chair, after wiping himself completely from the potion. In her mind, she wondered that Sue was an unusual man. But of course she didn't tell him that. Instead, she wanted to look at his products and talk about everything live. Sue agreed, and then hung up. Chu was nervous because Kang Xia had rejected his proposals many times. He didn't want her to accept Sue's proposal. The girl wanted to see Mr. Tan's products as soon as possible. While still sitting in his chair, Sue stuck out his index finger and leaned it against the stone table, and he took it and it broke into small pieces. Finally, he can use his abilities, he will cope with the difficulties of removing the outer layer. Now Su cannot fear death while practicing. As he put on his clothes, he thought that he had almost died while cultivating. Immortality enchantment is very dangerous. His hair was growing very fast and he needed a haircut already. And not only the hair became longer, but the body itself got bigger, so the clothes became small for him. At this time, the doorbell rang. Su opened the door and saw Chen. He already knew who would be there. Chen was very surprised for some reason. Su assumed that the wound should be gone by now. Although this was not the man's concern, the reason for his shock was that Su had grown so much in such a short period of time. After all the talking, Kang Xia drove home by car. Long and Chu watched the car while Chu said he wanted to see Tang Xiu one of these days. Long was interested that such a rich man from the capital like himself was so interested in the boy. Long replied that now was not the right time to arrange a meeting. To begin with, he wanted to test it. With these words, Chu became even more interested in the boy. However, Long believed that Tang Xiu would not be the last person in that city. Meanwhile, our hero said that his height is not Chen's business, and then invited him to the middle. The man noticed the broken cauldron and what was cooking in it. He managed to see hundreds of precious herbs and even giant snake bones. Sweat began to flow down his face. In his mind, he asked himself who this guy really was. After they entered the house, Su invited Chen to sit down. First he stepped on the fragments of the table, and then he saw the entire part of the table. He was surprised that such a large slab of marble had been crushed, as he had once heard that a spell of the highest level of practice could allow stones to be broken. He once again asked himself who this boy was. Our hero asked the man why he came, because of the broken table. Chen said that he came to visit him to thank him. He is no longer bothered by the pain, and he also runs a company, so he wants to buy the prescription. And handed him a bank card. In addition, he wanted something else. He abruptly knelt down in front of Su. Chen wanted the boy to take him as an apprentice. He healed him, and the man hoped that under Su's guidance, he would be able to practice enchantment better. Tang Xiu denied him this. Chen asked him to consider the proposal. However, the boy decided all this himself, and now he does not take anyone as students. But if Chen can make a patented Chinese medicine, then maybe Su will cooperate with him. Su revealed his plan to run a skin care company, so he needed someone to supply him with material. If Chen was interested in this, the boy would give him 5% of the shares. The man accepted these terms and said that Tan could rely on him. But Chen still hoped that Su would reconsider taking him on as an apprentice. The guy agreed and said that he could go now. Chen began to thank Su, but said that he could call him when he needed help. Finally, Su asked Mr. Chen not to let Xiaomei know that they knew each other. Chen wondered how he had learned of their relationship. Everything was very simple, replied Su. The man then at the first meeting, when he heard his name, Chen's surname and hers, when she counted the pulse, and also their smell was identical. 2 days have passed. Qingwu was walking around the schoolyard and remembered that kiss with Tang Xiu. This kiss was her first, that's why she remembered it so. Passing by the students, the girls gossiped about one boy, that he was very handsome and had become very tall. How did the teacher see him here, Su? Ian said that of course they were at a young age and active growth was the norm, but how could the boy grow so fast overnight? Su also had a new haircut. Yang compared Su to himself, they were almost the same height. Mrs. Khan complimented the boy on his height, and he asked what was the matter. She said he had an exam today and she believed him. Su assured that it was only a small piece of cake. They had almost parted ways when the teacher wanted to say something, but then changed her mind, wishing him luck and brushing her hair back. Yang asked Su when he became so close to the teacher, our hero told him to stop. Chingwu wondered why Su was so unconcerned. Meanwhile, the boy seemed to have read Mrs. Han's thoughts and turned his head towards her, but he continued on under the pretext of Yen and his words. After a while, Su was already in the director's office. He gave him the tests and said that he had 3 hours to complete the work. The boy could do it even in the office on the sofa, and then Mr. Hu would evaluate the work. Meanwhile, Professor Hu wondered how Su could become so tall. And indeed the boy looked them up and down. Su wanted to start as soon as possible, then reminded Mr. Hu to keep his word of resignation in case he passed the test with high marks. Hu confirmed it, but he was angry in his mind. He had been preparing this test for a whole week, so it is very difficult. 1 hour has passed since the start of the test. Su had already managed to complete it and Mr. Hu and the director were sitting there checking it. Meanwhile, the boy arranged with Kang Xia to meet outside the school next Wednesday at 12 o'clock in the morning. But then the girl suggested WeChat, but the guy decided to meet. 2 men were stunned after checking the test. Su blew and then said that it was time for him to hurry, so he asked if he could go. The director let him go. He was almost out of the office when Mr. Hu stopped him, told him to stand and asked how he could do that. Leaving the office, the guy said that how he did it shouldn't worry him, now he should worry because it's a new job. And questions for which he could not give the correct option was a sign of respect. That was the end of the conversation, and Su left the office. Despite the fact that the boy has overcome the difficulties of cleaning the outer layer, it will be difficult for him to make any breakthrough. Although ordinary herbs could help him practice magic, however, the main reason for his rapid progress was that snake. He couldn't make any breakthrough until he had some great herbs. To begin with, he should have asked Chen first, because he knows herbs and how to make them. Deep in his thoughts and waving his arms, he didn't notice Kyunghwa. She snapped him out of his thoughts with her voice. The teacher wanted him to stay with her. Su nodded that he agreed. Out of surprise, she nodded her agreement and covered her mouth with her hands. Then Su added, "About time to have lunch together." Mrs. Khan agreed to his proposal to have lunch together. He told her to follow him, and on the way he apologized for the awkward kiss. She said to ignore it. Su came to his mother's restaurant. He saw that those robbers who destroyed this store the first time had put in a lot of work and were on the right path, so he took them down for that. The chief said not to take it to heart. They were happy to work for him and raised the glass, but before Su could clink it, a voice called Lin Yun came from behind. It was one of the new restaurant assistants. He said that a man had come again. Yun was shocked. Su wanted to know who it was. But his mother did not answer him, so he got up and said he would look now. 2 uncles were standing near the exit. One of them was smoking a cigar and was very familiar. It was Uncle Shang-Wan. Su recognized him immediately. The boy asked him what he had forgotten here. Turning to face Su, Shai-Wan was shocked by its size. Su asked why he came here. Uncle pointed his cigar at him and told him to watch his attitude towards him, because he is his elder. However, the boy did not accept this, because he deserved to be his elder. For those words, his bodyguard took his suit. Lin Yun joined the conversation. She said that she had indeed given the money a few days ago. And then Su used his strength and grabbed the guard's arm, then threw him at the uncle. As if this great man was only a feather. Mother was very surprised. You could see the look of 2,000 yards in her eyes. Shang Wei began to cry that it was all because of him that they could live like this, so he had no right to treat him like this. Su covered his mouth with money and ordered him to leave the restaurant as soon as possible. Although the uncle was rich, he still picked up bundles of money, because as he thought, they should be his anyway. And then he left. But the guard stopped Su, because he did not allow him to go anywhere. Su and the boss went to the back of the restaurant. The boy asked if Shang Wen came here often. The chief apologized for not saying anything, even though the boy's mother asked him not to say anything. Although their cash turnover has increased, they still have large expenses. And when uncle came, he demanded a lot from Sister Sue. The leader of the bandits took a cigarette and started smoking it. Then he said that they wanted to beat him up with the boys, but Lin Yun didn't agree to that. At least because he is Sue's uncle. After these words, he snatched the cigarette from his hands and said that if the next time he comes to the restaurant again to make trouble again, it doesn't matter who he is to him. Then the best solution would be to simply beat him. The cigarette was crushed in his hand and burned with a blue flame. The chief asked what the security guard had to pay, because he was simply passed out from a broken arm, but he will definitely wake up tomorrow. Meanwhile, in a 10th grade class, the teacher was telling the students to memorize the formula, because it is a key element for next year's college entrance exams, when suddenly the bell rang for recess. But the teacher did not let them go anywhere. He asked them to give another 30 minutes of class. From this, of course, the students began to rebel, but the teacher also shouted at them and noticed that the exams were very close. Meanwhile, Sue texted Kang Shi that he would be late for class and asked to come to class 10. Kyungwoo was walking along the corridor. She was carrying tests in her purse, which she did not really want to check, because there were quite a few of them. Kang Xia was standing near the classroom. The teacher was surprised, then said hello and asked what she was doing here. Kang Xia was wearing glasses and said hello as well, then took them off and said she was here because she was looking for Tang Xiu. The teacher dismissed the students, so Sue said she was here for him. Yen also went out with a guy, fell in love. Kang Xia asked if it was him, looking at the hero, because she had never seen him live. The girl looked at him very surprised, and was also surprised at his height. Sue asked if he looked so strange. Kang Xia replied that no, it was just that she did not expect to meet a person with such a striking appearance. Sue invited the girl to a bar cafe, which was in front of the school. And he told Jan that he would not return with him today, because he had a meeting. Jan asked him to take it with him, but he refused. Kang Xia's girl's name seemed very familiar to Qingwu, perhaps she had seen her somewhere. And she remembered exactly where. On the cover of the book, the teacher also remembered who she was and the girl. She wondered why she had come here. The thoughts were dispelled by Jan, who wanted to help Mrs. Khan. They were sitting at the table and drinking coffee. Kang Xia said that she would study and test Sue's product, and in 2 weeks she would be able to make a decision and say whether she could cooperate. In addition, she wanted to ask Sue something else. Isn't Tang Xiu afraid that Kang Xia will steal his program and capital from him and then disappear, was the girl's question to the boy. Our hero called her the best professional manager. Such small amounts do not bother her. Sue already had to hurry, so he left the meeting and told Kang Xia that he had paid the bill. At that moment, Yen calls him and tells him to come back as soon as possible, because someone has kidnapped Mrs. Khan. It was already 5 o'clock in the evening. There was a man in the corridor, dressed like a goblin. He was talking on the phone, telling someone to move faster, because they don't know what some freak can do. The school director ran up to the man. After that, the man hung up. The director asked him what was going on. The man showed his ID and introduced himself as an investigator of the criminal police unit. He began to tell his story of how he followed the trail of a dangerous suspect. He hid from him in this school. All this happened because he recognized the policeman. And that's why the thief kidnapped the teacher. Yang was right next to Ms. Han. He made a phone call, and after that he told the thief to let the teacher go, but instead took him hostage. The policeman stopped him as best he could, but it was all in vain. After the replacement, the thief entered the office near which the telephone conversation was held. The thief has already made demands, and now they need to wait for negotiators and regimental policemen. The man asked the director to cooperate with him. And also told not to allow students and teachers to enter the school premises. How does he see his boss here? It was Tsuyumi. She ran up and slapped him on the cheek. And then she took him by the collar and said that if something happens to the hostage, he will bear full responsibility for his actions. Then Tsuyumi ordered him to leave, because the regimental policemen had already arrived and they would decide everything. As here in the office where the thief was, something cracked. They both went around the door and took their pistols. Shiomei made a gesture that meant sticking to her team. But before she could make a second gesture, a very heavy blow sounded in the office. The criminal flew out of the office by breaking the door. Tsuyumi was shocked by this sight. The suspect was flying with a lot of force, so the chief was afraid that he might fly over the veranda. As soon as he touches the railing with his back, a hand reaches out to him, and no, it was not Tsuyumi or someone else from the police. Su grabbed him by the collar and threw him down on the floor. The criminal fainted from such a blow. Our hero got into such a pose as if he were some superhero from comics. Mrs. Han and Yang came out of the broken door, who, unlike the teacher, was slightly beaten. The policeman reported to headquarters that the two hostages are safe and the suspect is under control. 5 minutes before, there was a carnage between Jan and the criminal in the office. Although Ian was big, it was not so easy to defeat a professional man, who also had a gun. The suspect used his weapon as a way to inflict more painful blows than a fist. The teacher could not continue to look at it and screamed with a request to stop. Jan was kneeling before the criminal. He, in turn, was angry with him, because this student could oppose him with such a weak body. The criminal turned to Mrs. Khan and said that Yang, or as he called him, the little bastard, would not be able to stand up for some time, and offered to play a grown-up game together. Yang, with bruises on his face, could not simply allow himself that this criminal had seduced the teacher, so he took all his strength into his fist and grabbed his leg. As it turned out, the man did not like it when he was grabbed by the leg and pointed his gun directly at the boy's head, keeping his finger on the trigger. At this time, Su was standing on the roof of another part of the school and watching all this, and then he went back. In order to run away as a result, Su used a ninja running stance and dove off the roof straight into the office window. He broke the window with his hands holding his hands in front of him. Probably because of this technique he did not receive any injuries. The criminal, of course, is not deaf and immediately reacted and pointed his gun in the direction of the window behind him. Our hero managed to grab the gun by its muzzle. The man leveled him with Spider-Man and fired a shot. Su did not have time to pull the muzzle to the other side, but his body managed to do not only that the bullet did not hit the head, but that it bounced off. The criminal did not understand what the hell had just happened. But he had no time to think. A fist burning with blue fire was already flying to meet him. Su chose to punch him in the stomach and then called his main problem as a criminal, he talks a lot. It was with the help of this blow that the suspect flew to the door and broke it. After that, when an ambulance arrived at the school, Shumei asked Su if he really knew Kung Fu. Su told how exactly he got into the office. But his story seemed vague to her. The guy growled at her, saying that he had already told everything, and if she didn't believe, then that was her business, he didn't care much about it. Shumei said that he should cooperate with them. Su couldn't understand why, to continue cleaning up the mess she had made herself. Tsuyumi was shocked by such a direct and truthful sentence. She accepted that it was their fault after all and thanked him. Shumei gave him the news from her supervisor that Su would be awarded the Samaritan Award. The boy thanked him for this, but he did not need it, so he said that it would be better to give this award to January. And then he went about his business, but Tsuyumi did not want to let him go. He turned his head in her direction and asked what it was. Suddenly, she used the same two-finger technique she had used when they first met. She was almost analyzing when Su pulled her fingers away. At this time, the voice of his friend rang out. Yang relayed that Mrs. Han was inviting him and Su to dinner, so he offered to go and braise the meats. The guy noticed the state of Yan's appearance, and he said goodbye to Shumei, looking away, but she did not take his eyes off him. Yang said he and the teacher told the police everything as Sue told him. The boy thanked him by calling him the owner of the Samaritan Award. Yang was surprised by such news. Already standing far behind Sue, Shumei felt the boy's rapid pulse. Comparing him with the one he was when they first met, and with the one he is now, they were two different people. It was already evening. Short news came on TV. They told about an adventure in high school and also about a student who helped arrest a foreign criminal. Li Wenxiang, the mayor of Xincheng, personally presented the boy with the award. And in addition, he published this heroic concession in Wenxiang newspapers. At this time, under the sound of the TV, Shumei reviewed Sue's basic information. Chen enters the room and asks the girl if she has the day off today. He looked at what she was looking at, his expression changing from amused to alarmed. He did not understand why she was still worried about the information about our hero. Shumei asked Chen why he immediately started stuttering after looking at Tang Xiu's personal information. And she was also interested in the name of the doctor who cured his illness. But before the man could say a word, the phone rang. Xiaomi took it. On the other end of the phone she was invited to the hospital as soon as possible, because the same foreign criminal had died. She didn't care about the questions anymore, so she took off running. Chen was lucky this time, but the happiness did not last long. Now someone started calling his phone. Already in the hospital, namely in the office, the doctor covered the dead man with a blanket. An undercover policeman said that the death was caused by strangulation, and the guard of the ward was simply brought out of consciousness. He also noticed that this criminal was very cunning. He previously broke the monitors. Xiaomi got angry, and then it occurred to her that they were accomplices, because she was most afraid that the criminal might tell the police the truth. But then she put those thoughts aside and looked at this problem from another angle. If this group of drug traffickers includes foreign nationals who can enter Xinjiang, then most of all they are supported by some other forces. Xiaomi offered to investigate how they got into the city. Chen's phone was called by Sue. He wanted to ask if he knew how to buy advanced herbs. The boy was concerned that the man would know where to get the many advanced herbs for the recipe Sue had given him. Mr. Chen knew where to get them. He is not a simple person, he has many friends who sell such herbs. The man asked what herbs were needed. The boy said he would write later and asked his friends to prepare something for him. And then Sue will come later and pick it up, and see what else he needs in time. In addition, he needs something else. Sue said that he had seen Shumei a couple of days ago and told him that she should not know too much about him. While holding the boy's personal case, Mr. Chen dropped the phone. There was a sound that did not sound like a voice on Sue's side of the line. Chen then stopped telling him about the personal file, instead apologizing and saying that he had all the boy's instructions. After hanging up, Mr. Chen got nervous, because Sue is a punchy guy, he should be as safe as possible in front of Shumei. However, he recalls that his daughter was never that interested in boys. And a thought came to him that made his jaw drop. Shumei will bring Sue home and tell her that they are getting married. Meanwhile, on the balcony, Sue was already walking to the middle and sneezed. I asked Jan how he was doing, but saw a picture of a guy sleeping on the table. Sue hit Yen with a twisted leaf. He woke up immediately. Our hero reminded him that it was he who asked to become his teacher and told him to finish his work faster. All this was watched by a sniper on top of a building 500 meters from the hostel and his accomplices. At this very moment, one of them brought food and held a bottle of booze in his hands. The guy who was standing next to the sniper asked the one who came if he finished with his work. The job was done. Charles was dead, besides he wondered why they still hadn't killed Ian. The guy said that it was very easy for him, he had a better idea. The sniper suggested that Jason look through the scope. And as soon as he looked into his ear, he saw Sue, who was looking directly at him. Sniper said they should act like Yan's classmates to gain his trust. Jason still hadn't moved from the moment Sue was staring right at him. He reassured himself by saying that he happened to glance in their direction and that was it, because he was only human. And it's night now. Then he took Jan's photo and lit it on fire with his cigarette, and ordered his men to clean everything up for themselves, but somehow the sniper fixed his gaze on something. At this time, Sue asked Yang to stay in the room and finish the homework before going to sleep. And he himself ran out of the dormitory. Those guys were very far away, his current power could see them but by no means hear them. However, he bet himself that those people were familiar with the foreign criminal. As he ran, he stopped and looked behind him at the building, then ran again. Around the corner, someone was hiding from him. He ran to the house where the criminals were originally, however, he no longer felt their presence, but decided to go up and check everything. The mysterious person who was hiding ran after him, marveling at his athletic training. Sue climbed to the top floor of the building. As here he feels the smell of burning, and notices a burnt, but not completely, photo, on which only the uniform of their educational institution remains. Then the photo was followed by footprints. Sue rubbed at the footprints of his soles and noticed red dirt. But later he got tired of that mysterious person hiding from him, because he knew about him from the first meeting. The man praised the boy, saying that he is still such an amazing person. Before he became his master's apprentice, he was a special forces scout, but Sue still noticed him. The man held out his hand and introduced himself as disciple Jia Ruidao. Now it was clear to Sue why Jia allowed him to beat him at the game, because he would not let the boy go so easily. Sue didn't want to waste time, so he wanted disciple Jia to say everything directly and concisely. It turns out that Master Jia went missing due to gambling on Jingmen Island. The master said that only Sue could save him, so the disciple asked to go with him to the island immediately. However, Sue had his own problems, he had something important to do, and most importantly he had exams. The principal and the teacher would not let him go. So there was no way he could go with him, at least not now. Disciple Jia began to plead with him that it was his help that they needed now. He even promised to talk to the principal and the teacher. It is also not necessary now. Sue agreed to help, but expressed his agreement in other words. He will take half of the money he wins. And then he went to the exit, telling the spy to come to him when he had finished everything. The man agreed. Sue wanted to add something else so that he wouldn't follow on his heels, or he might find out what might happen. He gave a shocking look. One day passed. Meanwhile, at Yang Qiling's house, his mother tells him that his father is very busy, and when Yang comes home, that's why he wants to come see him. However, the boy had to urgently return to school, explaining that a friend would teach him there. Then he got into a taxi and said goodbye to his mother. She shouted for him to come home with his friend. Looking at the departing car, she was glad that her son had started studying after all. But her joy did not last long. A man stood behind her, pointed a gun at her and told her to go with him. They came to an abandoned factory. The woman screamed for the criminal to let her go, but he first made the gesture quietly. And then he pointed the gun at her face and asked her not to scream, because she doesn't want the gun to ruin her face. The doorbell rang. Jason went and opened the door to the room and saw his men. He wondered why they had come so early. Zdroven said that something is wrong in the city. After the death of Charles, the police began to investigate their local agencies, but because of the danger they cannot accept, temporarily. Out of rage, Jason fired 3 shots into the ceiling and said if they all knew how to deal with all this hard. The hipster asked what they should do in this situation. Jason calmed down. He said he kidnapped Yan's mother. And told Miller to be gentle, he wants Ian to have a perfectly dead mom. Miller, licking the entire knife, said that it would be very gentle. His dad called. He informed him that his mother was missing and he had already called the police. At these words, Yan's face changed dramatically. He slammed his hand on the table. He quickly ran out of the room. Sue already understood what the matter was. These are all three on the roof. They thought that Yang had beaten that foreigner. As here he mentions a very important piece of evidence. The red mud from the boot prints was part of the porcelain making. Sue took out his phone and found a porcelain factory on the map. He had to get there as soon as possible. The taxi driver has already delivered his last customer for the day, and changed the inscriptions on the car. He was talking on the phone with someone about where they should spend the evening. It was decided to hold it in Sue's restaurant. Sue jumps out in front of him and holds out his hand, thus making a gesture for him to stop. The guy brazenly opened the car door and climbed into the front seat. The driver shouted at him, saying that his workday was already over. However, after Sue took out a large wad of money, the driver's mind changed, and they drove to the point on the map. After 10 minutes, they were already near the plant. The driver said that this place is here, but this factory has been abandoned for about 7 years. Sue used his powers and sensed Yang's mother's presence. The guy held out another wad of money and told him to hand it over to the police to see foreigners on the outskirts of the city. The money he gave him was for silence. But he threatened that if the driver tells about him, he will have trouble. Sue's level allowed him to deflect small caliber bullets, so he didn't know if he could withstand anything more. And then stopped. He could feel the presence of two people. First, he saw a picture of two men, one of them polishing a submachine gun. And the other two were Yana's mother and another criminal with a knife. Meanwhile, in the torture chamber, Miller was disappointed in Jan's mother. He thought she would be pretty. To begin with, he wanted to cut off her ears, and then send them to Jan as a gift. But he did not have time to do this, as Sue flew into the room through the window. Sue dealt a fatal blow with his hand. His hand was like a sharp blade. So Miller's throat was cut. Of course, such a technique was fatal for the bandit. Yana's mother started screaming at what she saw. Sue covered her mouth and told her to shut up and added that he was her son's classmate. He was here to help her. She recognized his name, but now was not the right time for discussion. Our hero told her to quickly escape through the window, and when she meets Yen, she will tell him to withdraw his statement to the police. His mother asked about Sue's safety, and he explained that although these boys were dangerous, he would have to, and before he could prove it, Jason's voice rang out. He called Miller. Yang's mother was running out the window, while Sue flexed his fists. Jason has already started mocking Miller, whether he might have fallen in love with his prey, but before he had time to enter the room, he gets a delicious punch in the face. The force of the blow was enough to knock Jason into the factory floor. The hipster saw it all, so he started shooting. Sue's strength allowed him to dodge bullets, but not all of them. Eventually he got close enough to strike the criminal. The blow was very strong and fatal, as in Miller's case. A weapon fell from the hands of a hipster. He was killed. Xing Xiu's consciousness was now becoming more and more dominant. After some time, the news was broadcast near the plant, which had already burned to the ground. The TV presenter said that one citizen told them that the fire broke out an hour ago, but there was nothing to worry about. Everything was under the control of the firefighters. How Sayumi broke in and took the microphone from her, threw it on the ground and crushed it. The TV presenter was angry with her. However, one of the police officers explained that filming is prohibited here. Sayumi went to the police undercover. He showed her the data of the investigation into the cause of the factory fire. It turned out that the fire was caused by kerosene. And they also found all the foreign criminals. But they were already dead before the fire started. Xiume angrily asked what was the cause of their deaths and whether their identities had been identified. So it was done. They were the 3 second members of the illegal processing of drugs. The policeman said that they found out that the criminals were killed by other people. Therefore, this fire was not arranged by them. Tsuyumi was angry, because these criminals should be subject to legal sanctions. It is not so easy to die. The man waited for the chief to express his opinion, and added that in the center of receiving alarm signals only Yen called. He said that his mother was already at home, so he cancelled the application. Xiume immediately thought of Tang Xiu. The next day in the men's dormitory. In the room, Yang bowed to Su. He didn't know exactly how to thank him, so he asked what he could do for him. Su refused his thanks, because he too is involved in this mess. If he had not given that award, everything would have been different. Su wanted to end the conversation. All he wanted was for Yang to take care of his mother. Yang told him that his dad wanted to see Su tonight and have dinner at the same table. He also added that they will not tell anyone about their kung fu skills. Su agreed to such a proposal, and then added that he wanted to teach him kung fu, because he was his best friend, and then he himself would be able to protect his family members. Yang was shocked by such news. He threw himself into the arms of our hero, because he had long wanted to learn everything. But not everything is so easy. Su set him requirements. The first thing he did was set a minimum score in the exams, and Jan must pass it. Second, he needs to start losing weight. There was a break. Su thought about his two souls that they had begun to unite amicably. Before his easy life, his life in the immortal world had become a dream. He thought that if it wasn't for Xing Xiu's consciousness, he would most likely not be able to overcome those foreigners. At that time, the bell rang for the lesson. Everything was fine. Su didn't need to be sympathetic before returning to the immortal world. Kyungwoo entered the class and told the news. Due to the fact that Tang Su is number 1 in the class and has a lot of efficiency, the school principal sends him to Jingmen Island so that Su can participate in the national school math competition. Everyone rushed to greet him. At that moment, Su's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message came from an unknown number, but it was that disciple Jia, now known as Gong Dalong. The message said that everything was set up and he was waiting for it next Monday. Now Su needed to go to that island. Mrs. Khan, in addition, added a second piece of news. That although there are not many days left before the exams, a new student is being transferred to their class. Su was shocked by who came in, and Yang just stood up from behind the desk and pointed at him and said that he had forgotten. The new student was a guy who owned a casino. He was also glad to see them. After school, Zhenglin began to protest against going to the island, because he only came here in the morning and did not want to be alone. He wanted to be Su's true friend. The boy asked him why he was giving up his happy life and came to school. The answer was given, not by Zhenglin, but by Boss Long, who climbed out of the car. He said that Master Chen was sometimes right, now our hero was really superior. Although Zhengling was short-tempered, he still respected Su very much. Long asked for help in disciplining him. And he added that if he needed his help, Su could ask for it. The hero agreed to this condition. However, now both Zhenling and Yang have the same requirements about the exam score. Long said to tell Jan's dad that he would visit him one of these days. And then he offered to have dinner at his hotel. But Su needed to go home today, so he came up with a plan. He used the services of Long. He in turn was not against. All Su wanted was for dinner to be moved to his home. It was almost 5 in the evening. Su brought his friends to his mother's restaurant. He asked where the boys were. As it turned out, they simply went to the bazaar to buy food. She thanked him for his care. Our hero asked her to prepare her favorite dishes for dinner today. Somehow Su learned that his mother had been crying. He was confused by this. Of course, she didn't want to tell the reason, so the hero asked Yen to take his friends to the second floor. He would come there soon. He asked her a second time what had happened. 5 minutes have passed. His mother told him that Uncle Shangwen still comes to her restaurant to ask for money. But there was an explanation for this. Uncle has some problems in his business and so he needs money right now. Sue was a little angry that this was all because of some 50,000 yuan borrowed when they moved to Xinjiang City. His uncle is very greedy. Lin Yun has never cared about money, and Sue magically knows that. It disappoints her that his uncle has become different comparing him in the past. He became a rude man when he became rich. Sue asked what would happen if he lost the money. His mother told him to calm down at least because he was his uncle. The guy took her by the shoulders and said that he knows how to solve this problem, because he is now at home. Lin Yun trusted him completely, so she immediately started cooking. It was 7 in the evening. Dinner began in room number 2. And all the first toasts were heard. Lin Yun was surprised that Mr. Long from the Long Company was having dinner with her. And so he was. Master Yang and he knew each other because his company had a new project. And Tang Xiu extended a helping hand. Long said he invested money in him and they decided to do business with him. The mother said she received 1 million yuan. This was Sue's reward. Yun breathed a sigh of relief, because she had never held such a large amount of money before, and besides, she didn't know how he got it. Sue said that the money was all hers now and she could buy whatever she wanted. Ta pointed to the jacket Yun had been wearing for a very long time and told her to go to the clothing store first. Long took them to the boutique. Yang praised Lin Yun, saying that any outfit looks good on her. Meanwhile, Sue and Long were having a dialogue by the car. He thanked for tonight's dinner, and said that he would take Yang home. Finally, Long told them to see each other after Sue returned from Jingmen Island. And maybe then they will get some news from Ms. Kongxia. Sue had one more request for the day. He asked Long if he knew Su Shangwen from the Su Real Estate Company. The next day came. Meanwhile, at 9 a.m. in the interview room, Shangwen was shouting about a pile of garbage. Their project starts next Monday, and their supplier has so abruptly stopped cooperating with them. And then he asked his employees if they gave them a bribe. One of those present said that they had already made a deal with them. He said it would be a conspiracy. But this did not bother Shangwen. They had to find out if they had enough materials to start the project. He ordered his subordinates to contact Yu Yi's Siguang's master. But he noticed that buying goods from him they spend a lot of money, but they will receive them on time. Shangwen continued to talk about the project, when a woman who knocked on his door entered the office. The woman was pushed away by 2 men. One of them showed his ID. These were from the tax office. Shangwen was surprised by their appearance, because today is a day off, and asked what they had forgotten here. The man said they came for an inspection and wanted to see the CFO. It was 12 p.m. An employee from the tax office brought documents to Long's office. He asked if he could believe the letters on the paper. The man said yes, because there was a seal, a signature and a fingerprint. Long trusted him. And told him to give it to the Director General of the Xingchen Police Station. It was a gift for him. In addition to this work, the taxman already informed all suppliers yesterday about Long's request. And also secretly reported to the tax administration. And checked the investor of the project 2 more times according to the requirements of Long's boss. He was interested in who he was. At 11:50 in the morning, Mr. Chen drove up to Sue's dining room. Sue introduced him to his mother, saying that it was another colleague of his. Yun thanked Chen for taking care of her son. Such kindness left Mr. Chen speechless. Sue had plans with him today, so he told his mother that he would try to come back earlier today. They were traveling in a white limousine. Chen pushed the glass of liquor to Sue and said that they would arrive at the herb market in 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, Sue can rest. The boy started to speak about what he thought about Chen's request, but his conversation was interrupted by a phone call. It was long calling. They agreed on something and Sue said that they would see each other soon. Mr. Chen offered his help. Sue asked him if he sometimes invested in real estate, the builders of which are the real estate company Sue. So Mr. Chen did so. He started to sweat. He asked Sue if something happened. The boy finished his sentence at the beginning that if he wanted to become his disciple, then Mr. Chen would do everything according to the boy's orders. That same day at 12:30 p.m. Shang Wen was walking to the taxi, angry because of the fine from the tax bureau. He was followed by his wife Zhang Meiyun, who told him that this fine should be paid by his sister, because she now has a very large turnover of money. Shang Wen couldn't stand Zhang's words, so he ordered them to shut their mouths. And then accused her of a fine. She asked what he was so afraid of, since they wouldn't be in much trouble for it. She was interested in why he began to care for his sister so much, and why he did not care for her when he beat her and asked her for money. He wanted to say the reason, but did not have time. Zhang stepped forward and told him to hurry. And now she has to make soup for their son. College exams will be held at school soon. Mr. Chen and Tang Xiu were walking through the herb market. Chen made sure that Shang Wen was the boy's blood relative. Our hero agreed, but did not really want to accept it. However, according to his mother's stories, he was a different person. Just ahead of them, Sue and Chen were walking to meet Shang Wen and Zhang Meiyun. Uncle was surprised by Sue's appearance, but then he turned his gaze to Mr. Chen and rushed to embrace him. He expressed his joy to see him again. Shang Wen asked him to take care of his project. However, Chen refused, as investigations revealed that his uncle had bribed Chen's employees and he was terminating their cooperation. Shang Wen began to make excuses that his construction plan was the best, he had invested a lot of money. Sue began to explain the reason for Mr. Chen's refusal. He simply asked him to do it. The uncle looked at the boy with an angry and at the same time shocked face and said, "It's you." At that moment his phone rang. It was his colleague who called, who informed him that the same people from the tax office came to them again, but they were not alone, but also with people from the board. The worst news for Shang Wen, which caused him to fall underground, was that they wanted to close the company. Uncle ordered to use all means to prevent this from happening. Now Zhang's phone started ringing. It was Xiang Fei's son calling. At first she ignored the call, but told him she would call back. But she was shocked by the information she heard. It turns out that she is now being hunted by the police because she had a run-in with someone a year ago and then killed him and covered up all the evidence with money. Sue snatched the handset from Zhang's hands. On the other end of the line, the boy told Xiang Fei that he would later tell about all the bad things his parents had done to his family. And then Sue gave the phone to Shang Wen. That was enough for today. The phone fell to the ground by itself and broke. After taking a few steps away, Sue wanted Shang Wen to remember the words he once said to the naughty little Sue. So he clearly remembered those times. He was soothing the boy, but not in a normal way. His uncle told him not to cry because he was very naughty, so his mother punished him. Shang Wen then said this phrase, that Tang Xiu should be punished if he does something wrong. On this day, this phrase affected him himself. Sue and Chen walked on, while the uncle stood there crying. It was 6 in the evening. Meanwhile, near Tang Xiu Villa, Mr. Chen placed all the products in the yard. The guy thanked both Chen and Long for their cooperation, and advanced the bank card. However, Mr. Chen did not want to accept the card. Sue didn't argue with him about this, instead saying that he had talked to Long and he would take Chen's project, so he could not worry. And then he took out a notebook and handed it to his husband. Elementary ways of practicing enchantment were written there. Mr. Chen had enough knowledge, so he can practice at least from today. Sue will tell the rest after he arrives from Jingmen Island. Mr. Chen thanked the boy again, but said he had to go. Su walked into the yard where there were many containers of herbs. Su needed to arrive at Jingmen Island the day after tomorrow, so he needed to quickly and immediately absorb the nutrient from the herbs. With their help, he will be able to move to the stage of flesh growth from the stage of removing the outer layer. 2 days have passed. Su was at Xinjiang Airport at 7 in the morning. Gong was already waiting for him there. From this moment on, the game just begins to gain momentum. Meanwhile, on a busy beach on Jingmen Island, the girl was lying on the sunbed. She asked Chu Yi about whether he met Longram in Xinchen. Yes, he met him. One girl asked so much about him that he thought she was still thinking about him. The girl said not to take the fool to heart, for her he was only the oldest at school. Chu Yi was a rich man in the capital. He continued to poke her. As a result, the boy was offended by Wian Lula. In the end, he accepted his guilt and apologized. In return, the girl threatened to evict him from her home. To apologize, Chu Yi prepared an interesting piece of news related to Long. This news was about Kang Xia. The boy introduced her to Long. Lulu was surprised by such news, because the boy had been chasing her for a long time, and now he had made her Long's friend so easily. Chu Yi wished that she would not interrupt him and listen to the end. Kang Xia was not his friend, he needed a manager. And the most important thing is that Long's partner was only 18 years old. Lulu was shocked and wanted to hear his name as soon as possible. Tang Xiu arrived at Jingmen Island International Hotel at 11 a.m. Jia met him. He was grateful for his appearance here. It was very hot outside, so he suggested they go to the middle to start. They sat down at the table and Jia began to bring Su up to date. The first thing he did was to introduce his son Jialei. He was Deluxe's junior disciple. Without any hesitation, Xiu directly expressed his opinion as to why he was here. His guesses were as follows: Eli lost all the family values in gambling, and then turned to his father for help, and his father in turn turned to Tang Xiu. Eli poked his finger at him and asked what he was saying. For such disrespect, he received a blow on the face from his father. Jia apologized for this. And then he began to tell his story. It's his fault, he just underestimated his opponent. Code round Jia was losing. He added that he didn't have enough money to play tomorrow, but his opponent wanted the jade pendant that Jia carried with him all the time. This pendant was given to him by his wife when she was still alive. So he can't just give it away. So he asked Su for help. The boy remembered the day he beat Jia, but what was he counting on now, and would Su be able to win? Jia said that day he noticed that Su could learn in a few minutes what ordinary people take years to learn. And therefore, if he shows him all the knowledge he has learned in his life, then Tang Xiu will play better than himself. The boy asked how many times he had lost. Sayaz lost all his family property except the family home. Now it was about 300 million yuan. So Su wanted Jia to keep his word. The guy wanted to start right now, because he needed time to understand and practice gambling techniques. 5 hours have passed since their interview. Su had already shown simply shocking results in the card game. Jia was amazed because he didn't expect Su to be able to learn the technique so quickly. It wasn't a problem for the guy, but the guy said about reviews and changing cards. He laughed and said that cheating is very popular in gambling. Regular players always rely on luck. Su wanted a brief description of his opponent. Jia offered him to have dinner first, just on the way he would tell about the opponent. Su agreed to this proposal. The opponent was a man named Chen Kai. As it turned out, he also invited his player. This player had the same master with Jia in the past. This is Futai. He was Jia's junior fellow student. But he was kicked out because of bad behavior. Since he died as his master, he has partnered with wealthy businessmen to raise money through gambling. On the way, they meet exactly the one they are talking about. Ifutai. He stood with his hands in his pockets, but said that you cannot get away from the enemy. Yifutai was impatiently waiting for tomorrow's game against Jiaruedao. And then teased him with a pendant, and said that he would own it forever. Jia rushed to take it from him, but Yifutai managed to dodge. He put a footstool on him and he flew and fell to the ground. Yifutai mocked him, calling him too old to think and walk normally. He made this fall for him as a sign of tomorrow's pay. But suddenly, Yifutai flew to the ground. He was surprised at this turn of events. Su did this, explaining that it was not intentional. One of those standing behind Yifutai began to shout that how dare Su do such a thing on Jingmen Island, and began to threaten, asking if he knew who he was. Chu was standing next to him, and he saw how our hero knocked down Wu Futai, and not by any means, but only with one index finger. Chen Kai had already ordered his bodyguards to beat up the boy. However, Chu Yi prevented this. He apologized for everyone, accepting his guilt in this event. He patted Yifutai on the shoulder. Su didn't say anything other than to get out of here. Yifutai asked from behind Su if he was Jia's new disciple. The boy replied that he was Tang Xiu, his opponent tomorrow. Chu Yi was shocked, that was the image of the mysterious money magnate. Chen Kai asked him if he knew who it was. Chu Yi remained silent. Yifutai began to feel angry that Jia had already lost his mind, giving the opponent, in his opinion, a weak boy. They arrived at their destination. It was the Bai Yan Hotel. Jia invited him to the middle. But Su turned his head. He saw the tactics of cutting water and capturing dragons. Su asked if he knew anything about the hotel owner. Very little, he answered. The owner was quite a mysterious person. This hotel is open only for VIPs. Among them, only high-ranking officials, noble gentlemen and people who know Kung Fu are included in them. The owner also establishes a tactic called Qianzi. Su paused at this word, it was familiar to him. He asked Jia if he had mistaken the name of the tactic. He remembered the times when he was in the immortal world. This tactic was invented by him and her, they were the only ones who knew about it. However, Gu Yenner, who was Su's disciple, disappeared 6,500 years ago on her journey, finding an immortal ice soul in the Yum Dead Sea. Jia interrupts him to ask if he is all right. Su said he would come soon because he wanted to walk on the beach right now. He promised his student that he would find the truth. Meanwhile, in the apartment, Chu Yi was on the phone and promised to convey the words to Lulu. And then he went to Chen Kai, took a glass of wine from him, and said that Tang Xiu was really Long's friend. Chen Kai was grateful for their help, so he thought what was required of him was to tell Yifutai to lose to him. But it was not necessary to do this. Mr. Long had full confidence in Tang Xiu, he made a bet. Chu Yi said that they would just relax and see what happens next, and in addition, he shared the information with Chen Kai that Su had won Jia in the past. By this time, the men had already arrived at their room at number 15. Jia ordered that Gong follow Yifutai and told him to be careful. Although Jia had taught Su many tricks, it would not be enough. He knew that Yi would play dirty, so he had to prepare. Sometimes Su went to the stone, looked like some kind of sacred. He ran his hand over it and assumed that this stone was a tactic to cut the water and capture the dragon. What can be used for feng shui to gather strong energy? However, the dragon's capture stone was 2 meters away from its correct location. Su thought that it was Gu Yenner's careless work. As the woman tells him that he does not belong here and that he cannot touch the stone, and turns his head towards her. He saw that woman. At first she appeared to him in the guise of his student Gu. And then his gaze cleared and he saw a girl, though she looked a lot like Gu. She informed him that she was not talking to the wall. Su said he was here to have dinner. He saw that this girl looked like his student, but was younger. The woman introduced herself as Gu Xiaoxue, even the last name was the same, and said that the boy must not touch the stone under any circumstances, even if he is a guest here. Su did not object in any way, but instead said that this stone was 2 meters away from its proper place. Gu pushed him aside. Even her strength reminded Su of his disciple in the immortal world. Gu did some kind of analysis and everything was confirmed, but she couldn't figure out what kind of guy it was. Then she remembered the story her teacher had told her. But then Su asked if he was the creator of the tactic. The boy did not give an exact answer. Su wondered who had taught her this. Gu looked at the boy carefully. He looks like the teacher told her. She should be careful around him. However, to prove his point, Su needs to go through Qianzi's tactics to see if he has enough courage to try, the girl said. Su just smiled slightly, then turned and told her to lead him where he needed to go. At this time in room 15 of the Beiyan Hotel, Jia and his son were sitting at the kitchen table. Someone's voice came from the window, that something should begin. They both ran to the window. Jia guessed that someone was going to challenge Qianzi's tactics now. Sun showed who it was Su. Jia decided to first see how things would go. Down there, Miao Wentam's master arrived at Su and Gu's. It was a guy with orange hair. He asked how Gu was doing. The girl did not answer this question, but expressed her feelings that she was pleased to see him here. Miao asked who that guy was standing next to her. She said that Su is here for tactics, his turn will be his. Miao was a little surprised. He told Tang Xiu that he is young enough for this, it is really dangerous. Gu added that if he was going to go through Jiangzi's tactics, then they were not responsible for any injuries caused during the ritual, or worse, death. Su told her to keep her mouth shut. Miao wasn't too overconfident or rude, he wished Su luck. Su shook Miao's hand. He felt the boy's strength. Miao was shocked that how could he have such a strong inner strength. But there was not enough time to be distracted. Qianjia's tactics had begun. Miao had already challenged several years ago, and he only managed to reach the second level. However, he was confident that years of practice would allow him to finish the third level. He used some power. To Su, this was like a qi life barrier. Smoke was coming from Miao, everyone was standing still and silent. The first level was passed. He from the audience, who was a VIP person, began to call this tactic simply ground with a net. Gu didn't want to put up with this kind of treatment, so she called security and ordered them to kick him out and remove his VIP status. That rascal, of course, began to defend himself that they knew him. But it all came down to one place. Su continued to look at Miao's tactics. He looked very good on the outside, but his internal strength and vital qi were weak. The vital qi barrier could allow him to pass the first level, but his strength would be exhausted very quickly. In the second level, Miao will have to fight a large monster that looked like a fiery wolf. Gu was a little excited, but Su was not at all. Miao wanted the wolf to remember who was fighting against him today, and showed him in full the scar on his eye that this monster had done to him several years ago. That's why the boy is here to take revenge on him. The wolf raised its giant paw to deliver its claw strike. Everyone looked at what was happening. Ordinary people couldn't see what was going on inside the Qianji unless they entered it themselves, so they couldn't see the battle, only the stone and the challenger. There was a lot of smoke and steam coming from it. Just then one of them shouted for them to look at Miao. Ordinary people, although they could not see the tactics, but instead clearly saw the consequences, the damage to the contender. Miao's body was covered in deep cuts in a matter of seconds. Su assumed that he was already level 2, but his life qi was almost depleted, so surrendering to him was the best solution. All scratched and wounded Miao won the second level, so he decided to go further and went to the third level. He uses all the remaining qi life force to protect himself, it is very dangerous. The Jia family was behind it all. The man knew that Qian Zi's tactics were dangerous. He was glad looking at Miao that it wasn't Tang Xiu there. For his plan tomorrow, the boy must not be injured. As here the applicant began to tremble. Miao's outer clothing was completely torn as if something had exploded inside. He remembered those words before Su's tactics so that he would not make an impossible effort at the third level, but it was already too late. Exhausted, he began to fall to the ground. Su noticed this and rushed to him. All three were excited and shocked. Su still managed to catch Miao in time and then put him on the ground. The boy stood up and told Gu to clean up Miao when he would pass the next level. Gu yelled at him to run from there, because in her opinion death was waiting for him there. Su pretended not to hear those words and turned his head to what was waiting for him. And a giant samurai skeleton was waiting for him. The warrior delivered a heavy blow, but it went completely into the ground. Su managed to dodge. Then the skeleton swung horizontally. Su managed to dodge this time, and it turned out that the way to the skeleton was completely free, so the boy did not hesitate and struck him in the forehead. He could not withstand the force of the blow and fell on his back. This was exactly Su's tactic. He made this soldier from the figure of the Sword Valley Sentinel in the immortal world. It turned out that the tactic had 7 levels. Su was currently at the level of resetting the outer layer of immortal enchantment. Everything was fine for him, but it will be difficult for him to go through her. However, the skeleton began to make itself felt. One blow was not enough for him, and he used his own fist while lying on the floor. However, in order to pass 7 levels, Su would probably use vital qi, although Miao's power was limited, but he had Xinyan power, and this tactic was his invention. Su did many tricks while doing this tactic. The skeleton samurai's weakness was his own right arm, so the boy punched him. There was a big explosion in the arena. This explosion was caused by a sudden increase in power. Gu didn't understand how Su could control it. And also the stone, it was destroyed. Ever since Master Gu made it, no one had been able to pass the 3rd level in that time. She couldn't believe it. The 3rd level was completed. Miao appeared in the arena with Su, who had to be immediately removed from the stage and given an ambulance. At that time, the boy was going to the 4th level. First, Su passed the 4th level, then the 5th, 6th, and by posture began to enter the 7th level. Everyone was just shocked by him. The task of the 7th level was to defeat one's inner demon. He was once again in the immortal world, but not Tang Xiu. Next to him was the same traitor. She reached for his ear and asked where he had disappeared to for so long, but the answer was a quick, precise cut with her hand on his neck. At this, the 7th level was completed. Su told himself that the 3 traitors would not have long to wait for the kind of participation that his pseudo-love was waiting for at this level. Jia stood up behind him. He was worried if Su was injured. The boy reassured him, there was not a scratch on him. Gu then came up to him and handed him the VIP card, and then started talking about her teacher. But Su didn't let her say anything, because he already knows who her teacher is, and even more so, she shouldn't be here. He still took the card, but told Gu to contact him as soon as possible if her teacher returned. And now he will go eat. However, he was rebuked by Miao and thanked Su for helping him and apologized for underestimating him. He realized that there was still heaven on the mountain. Finally, before leaving completely, Su gave him advice that the next time she gives him advice, he should definitely listen to it. Miao asked the boy's name from behind. Su tossed him a jar of blue potion. Ta said for Miao to drink it, it would help stabilize his internal qi and his injury would heal in just a day. Miao was shocked because even the medicine he knows can heal his injuries due to age, but here in a day. Whether he believed it or not was his business, Su said, but he realized that Miao knew a lot about aura. And besides that, now he introduced himself. Everyone was shocked by his name. Just like Teacher Gu said, the boy's name will be Tang Xiu. In the boy's opinion, Miao should have a deeper understanding of the monk's method in order to benefit him in the future. The next day at 10 a.m. in the open sea, all sailing on a large cruise ship. The host at the Paradise Club announced that an interesting final gambling game would be held today on Jingmen Island. And the cards will be checked before the game by the owner of the Paradise Club herself, Ms. Oyen Lulu. As soon as she came out, all the men who were in the room brought bouquets of flowers, wedding rings and wanted her to become a loved one. The host reassured them all, Ms. Lulu is only here to check the cards. She approached the final table. As it turned out there were no problems. Therefore, the host began the final speech before the match. He invited the participants to enter the hall. On the left is Mr. Chen Kai's representative at the game, Mr. Yi Futai. And on the right is the representative at the game on behalf of Jia Zhuidao. Tang Xiu did not want to reveal his name, so he is Mr. T. 20 minutes before the match, Jia was telling the news that Gong was able to get. Yi Futai turns out to be an illegal dealer. The man advised Su to hide some cards, relying on his speed these cards would not be noticed. However, the boy did not want to play like that, not even an ounce of fraud. All Jia needed to do was trust him. As someone's voice rang out, he was talking about how Su knocked Yi off his feet with one finger, and then the two of them saw that it was Lulu and Chu Yi. And then their eyes met, just as Chu Yi was about to meet Tang Xiu. He nervously introduced himself to the boy. The girl began to carefully examine Tang Xiu. Chu Yi was a little surprised by this. Lulu asked how exactly he was able to attract Long Zhenggu's attention, since he didn't look unusual to her. Su didn't answer her, but told Jia to get out of here. Such disobedience made the girl angry. The time has already come. The players sat in their seats, and the audience watched them intently. Today's dealer was Liang Wei. He said that this room is monitored by cameras, so he asked everyone to behave normally. Today's game will consist of a system of 5 matches for 3 wins. And today's game will be poker. Gong wanted to say something to Jia about Tang Xiu, but now was the time to just trust the boy. Liang Wei announced the minimum bet was 100,000, each of the players had chips worth 10 million on the table. If one of the players wants a supplement, it will be available at any time. There is no problem with this. Liang Wei asked the players if everyone was ready to start the game. But before that, Yi Futai deliberately showed his talisman to annoy Jia. Su was ready, so was Yi Futai, he was still going to go fishing today. Liang Wei began skillfully shuffling the cards. His technique was breathtaking. The cards have already reached the table. Su noticed and analyzed his technique. Before the first 10 cards, he uses his tricks. At this time, the cards were already flying to the players. Yi Futai was more than lucky, just like Su, he had a bad schedule. Jia's face showed it, but Su did not show any excitement. The opponent put forward a bet of 1 million. Su did the same and said to continue the game. The dealer and Yi exchanged glances. Liang Wei reached for the first card in the row, but Su noticed that he had not taken the first card, but the second. He gave it to Su. Jia was shocked that Futai asked the dealer to give a royal flush card. But Su was not in such a stage, so he put forward a bet of 5 million. This intention was supported by the opponent. He asked the dealer to open the cards quickly, because Futai really wanted to see Su cry. He raised the stake to 7 million. And then asked Su if he really wanted to continue playing. Futai began to resent that Su was Jia's last hope, but no matter how hard he tried, he would eventually be defeated. Su answered him calmly that he will continue to play. In addition, as a bet, he will add the documents for Jia's land worth 1 billion. And then he asked Futai if he would continue. Xing Jia began to call Su a madman, because these documents are for the land of their descendants. His father asked him to shut his mouth. He supports the bet and bets 1 billion as well. He wanted to see what kind of luck Sue has. The guy also decided to act cunningly. He asked Ms. Lulu to open the last card. To Futai's surprise, she agreed to do it. Appears before the game in the same place where they met. Sue asked if her name was Ms. Ouyang Lulu. So it was her. The guy heard from Jia that she could manage the game, proportionally reduce the cost of the contract and the general fund of the game. It was a business regulation. The girl asked if he even knew about it. Sue asked her if he bet more than 800 million today, she would help him in a fair game. Yi Fetui was angered by this move from Sue. He could not understand how the dealer changes even during the match. The guy reassured him, because the cards have been checked for a long time, only the dealer changes. Sue wanted to know why his opponent was so worried. Jia asked if Futai's behavior was related to any of his problems. Mrs. Lulu did not think that there would be any problems with her becoming a dealer. The story goes back to that moment before the match, when Sue asked Jia how much his land document was worth. Jia then said that 1 billion. Sue pulled out his card, which had more than $28 million in assets. He wanted to occupy ancestral lands, and in case of defeat, he would return the money to him. The main reason why the guy helps Jia was money. Mrs. Lulu also promised to help. In this game, it was better to make bets with large capitals. If he wins, including the loan assets, Mr. Jia could receive at least $1 billion. Ms. Lulu came to the center of the room and asked the second player if he was willing to back the 1 billion bet, as Sue did. If Futai doesn't bet that much, then he doesn't have a straight flush or a royal flush, so in the end, Sue will win, and he doesn't need it. The dealer can no longer help him, so he takes matters into his own hands, or rather the hidden card. He hits the table with chips and says that he supports the bet. Sue noticed that he wanted to replace the card. Futai shouted that he would win this game and get all the money. Ms. Lulu made the decisive move of the game. Everyone was in anticipation, but Sue was completely calm. After the flip was over, she asked the two players to reveal their cards. Sue had 7 diamonds and 2 hearts. Futai could not believe it. The time has come to announce the results of the first match and Ms. Lulu will do it. Mr. Futai has 2 trump cards, but no pair and no ace of spades, while Mr. T has 2. And just as the moment came to announce the winner, Futai gets up from the table and accuses Sue of cheating. Sue took the matter into his own hands and told Futai that they had been thoroughly checked before the game and before entering the hall. Who can be involved in fraud is a paid dealer or staff. The guy said that even if he was the one who set up the dealer, he would be happy to invite him to check it out if Mr. Futai wanted to. In this case, Mrs. Lulu will be the dealer in the next match. Sue thanked her and apologized for the trouble. And according to the agreement, Sue takes away the jade pendant and has lost 10 million from Futai. Sue asked him to prepare his money as soon as possible and add it to the second game. Futai couldn't just keep silent about this kind of attitude towards himself, so he called the boy a bastard and promised to win the next game. Futai thought that if Sue used the hand he used to remove the pendant from him, he would not be able to do it. His eagle eye won't let him. In the meantime, the boy handed over the Jia pendant. The old man was very grateful. He said that he would remember the help for the rest of his life. But Sue interrupted him, because this was only the first game, only the beginning. Mr. Futai added money to the bet so the game starts again with the second round at. Ms. Lulu announced that the deck of cards will change with each new game. To himself, Futai was already thinking of a plan that he would make only one move. No one would even have time to notice how he was changing cards. As here his thoughts are interrupted by Ms. Lulu with the fact that she will check the cards from both sides. Futai got up from the table. He was surprised by their color and pattern. These cards, Ms. Lulu explained, were produced in a limited edition especially for her Paradise Club. Su asked his opponent why he was so afraid to bet before the turn of the card. He was just going to check himself. Futai had a problem though. He used a card he had hidden from the previous dealer. But he relied on the fact that Su is too young and thus not very professional and vigilant in gambling. He shouted that it was time to start the game, then turned to Mr. T and vowed that today he would show why he was called the demon of gambling. Su was calm and reserved, while Futai, on the contrary, was very fussy. He lost the second match and the third soon followed. Now the dealer was Ms. Lulu in all these matches. Millions were lost and won. On the third round, Mr. T got 2 aces, making him the winner. Spectators were surprised by his third victory and a series of victories. Instead, Futai was in sadness. He announced that he wanted to play again and bet all the money on the table. Mr. T assured him to think carefully before starting the fourth round because Su had already won 7 billion. Futai was not interested in this, for him it was insignificant at this time. But Chen knocks him to his feet with his slap. He asked Futai if he even knew what he was betting with the money. Mr. Chen told him that if he saw him on the island after today, he would disappear without a trace. It even sounded like a threat. Su brought him back to the game and asked if he still wanted to play. Futai's answer was that he placed a bank card on the table. There were 300 million in the account. He bets on his move, and Su must support him. This time, Futai vowed to win. Mr. T wanted to know exactly how. Everything was very easy. The dealer takes a deck of cards and throws them into the air. The ions in turn must catch these cards before they touch the table, and whoever has the highest number is the winner. The cards were thrown. Su asked which one was best, since the ace of spades was still there. Futai told him that from his point of view the value of an ace was enough. But of course he lied by reaching for the joker. Su saw him too. He grabs and takes away the joker from his opponent with lightning speed. After that, Futai was in a daze, realizing that he had lost this match and lost money and status. The audience was in awe of Su's speed and the card he held in his hand. The boy told E that he was too slow. After the match, everyone just rested and enjoyed the trip on the big cruise ship. Su received a message on his phone. $500 million were credited to his account from Mr. Jia. At this time, the man himself came up to him and asked if he had received the money yet. So they came, but this amount was more than what they had agreed upon. Jia bowed before him, but said that Su deserved it, because without him he would be in poverty, so he asked to accept this reward. With all these nervous circumstances, Mr. Jia gives Su 2 days of hospitality. However, the boy had other things to do. He urgently needed to return to Star City today. Jia first thought about going to school. He told Su that he gave him a vacation. However, it was about business, so he needed to hurry. The man understood what this business was, so he had no right to detain him here. They shook each other's hands in farewell. Holding a glass of wine in his hands, Tang Xiu remembered that the days had come for Ms. Kang Xia to improve her test results. Su must have status to build a company. As here his thoughts are dispelled by the crowd who were surprised by the appearance of Miss Lulu, and she, in turn, came to Su. She congratulated him on his victory. Because of the boyfriend, she received many guest fees. And as a gift for our hero, Miss Lulu invites him to dinner with him. At this time she closed her eyes, because this is his only such lucky chance in life, in her opinion. Chu Yi told her to open her eyes because she was talking to herself. It turned out that Su was already on another part of the ship. He was not interested in this offer. Chu Yi reassured Miss Lulu by telling her that Mr. Su was a completely different person with his own motives. And then he decided to talk to him alone about Long. Chu Yi extended his hand saying that Long was a mutual friend for both of them. Su remembered him. He was the same rich man from the capital. But he doubted his assumptions, so he asked again. So his assumptions are correct. In addition, Chu-yi was inferior to Long. Just then the boy was hit on the head with a tray by Miss Lulu. Anger was burning in her eyes, and this anger ignited Tang Xiu. After all, not a single man has ever refused her any of her proposals. Before returning to the city, Su wanted to go to the market and look at the medicine, maybe he would find something good there. When Miao meets him on the way, he congratulates the boy on his victory. But he expressed his admiration and feeling of being in the role of a spectator during the game. Su could see from his expression that he did listen to him this time and took the medicine he gave him. Miao thanked him for that as well, because all the healed wounds were thanks to Su. This was good news for the boy. Miao wanted to know where he came from. To this, Su responded without comment. Miao felt this was too much and he took his fist. With such strength as Miao has, it is impossible to outwit Su in any way. He is very alert and quick in his movements, so he managed to catch a fist with one hand, and with the other he raised Miao under the neck. Su told him not to kill anyone again. Su assured him that if he did such a trick again, he would do a wicked trick on him himself, he would kill him. Miao was surprised that Su was able to see and catch the strike that held chi energy with a few fingers. Miao cheated a little, he only wanted to buy from Su the prescription for the medicine that he gave him. Also, Miao wanted to know how much Su knew about animals. Su stopped at this question. The hero and Miao were on the southern beach of the island. They had already been driving a sports car for 2 hours. Miao asked Tang to check his phone, specifically the messages. The message said that the account had been topped up by $10 million. Su noticed that Miao was very rich. He could not even imagine how much. Miao also thanked for being allowed to buy the medicine prescription and also apologized for the situation, as it was the first time he had seen such great inner strength. Su did not take this into account, he was interested in the animals. Miao shared the information that a month ago, he found out that large beasts were being cooked at the Tide Villa. At first, Miao said, he thought they were ordinary animals, but the day before, he had been to an exhibition of a beautiful villa, and he was lucky enough to see the bones of these animals. After he checked them many times, the real element and life energy remained in the bones, and how was the white shark usually 2 meters long, and this one was 4. Therefore, Miao came to the conclusion that this animal was a cultivator. He was not surprised that the shark was caught. Therefore, Miao invites Su to hunt the beast cultivators in the open sea. If they manage to hunt even one with such a large element, then it will simply be a big harvest for both of them. In addition, meat is useful for cultivation, but bones were much more valuable and Su would use them first. Miao asked if Tang knew how to use cysts, because he himself did not know how to do it. Passing by the villas, Su saw how the owner of one of them took only the meat of a wild animal and threw away the bones. Miao said that if he wants to take them, he can take them. He also asked to share information about the elements. Su said he would stick to what he said. Just at that moment they arrived at a beautiful villa. They went to her. There, Manager Yu happily met Miao and asked what he would taste today. White shark meat, answered Miao. Su was lost in thought as he watched the conversation. The cultivation technique was the same as that in the immortal world. However, for full, normal cultivation, Chi's vitality, and Miao's or even Chen's level of understanding were very low. At this time, Manager Yu asked to wait for the dish. Miao informed Su that they would have to stay the night at this villa today, and they would leave here tomorrow. But the boy didn't really care when they entered the villa. There were policemen on guard. Su was interested in who was the owner of the villa. The owner of the villa, Miao said, was the patriarch of the Tang family from Beijing. As they say, it ranks 5th in the country in terms of strength. However, there was one big but. He was already very old and now this villa is managed by his eldest son Tan Dong. He rarely appears here, but this is where the auction will be held tonight, and maybe he will come. Su was interested in the auction and what goods would be there. Miao said that there were many things, but mainly there might be bauhinia flower, and also a lot of different Chinese herbal medicines. This is the reason why Miao came here. Su wanted to see what would be there as soon as possible. At this time, Manager Yu had already brought them a dish, white shark sashimi. He apologized for the wait and placed the cold dish on the table. Miao invited the boy to taste the dish first. Su took the meat into chopsticks and chewed thoroughly in his mouth. This was what they had come for, although the aura was not that strong, but it was indeed a beast. Before leaving tomorrow, Su needed to make some preparations, and he also asked Manager Yu if the owner of the villa would be there tonight. The manager disappointed him. He won't be there today, but they have Mr. Tan Dong instead. Just at that moment, he was passing by their room. Tang Dong heard that the conversation was about him and asked the manager what the guests were saying. The boss took them to what looked like a freezer and turned on the light there. Due to the auctions, only 4 not very good white shark skeletons remained. Su touched one such and then asked Tang Dong if he sells such skeletons. Of course, in many cases they do not do this, because it is very difficult to catch them. But the boss's mind changed, as Su offered 500,000 for each one for 6 months, which would have whole bones, skin and blood. And for these 4 he offered 200,000 each. It wasn't a problem. The boss was interested in what exactly for 6 months. Su replied that then he would no longer need them. The guy wanted to pay 800,000 right now. The funds transfer was completed. Tang Dong said he would arrange the delivery as soon as possible. They shook hands. It was a good deal. The boss wanted to know to which address the dice should be sent. Su said he was from Xincheng, then he would give the address and phone number. Xincheng City was familiar to Tang Dong. He became a little serious. And then he asked if they had met before. The guy did not think so, and after a moment he asked his worker to go to the city center and pick up some goods on the list. Dong did not deny him this, said that anything is for him. On that note, Su needed to go. However, the boss was very interested in this guy, so he finally wanted to know his name. The guy from behind answered him, Tang Xiu. Tang Dong was struck by his surname. He was shocked by his resemblance to the man who, in his memory, lies in a coma in the hospital. It's 7 o'clock in the evening, and the auction should start right now. All the people in the villa began to gather and sit down in the great hall. Among them was Miao, who was reading a book, and then he looked at his watch. The time was about to end and he was worried that Su was not there yet. How here he is slightly thrown off track by a woman's voice telling him to take his seat. But the fact that the auction will start now. At that moment, Su arrived just in time and sat down next to Miao. Miao asked if something happened to him. The boy said that after the auction, they should check the things that Boss Tang bought for sea hunting. They began to be interrupted by other people's bids. It all started with the sum of 7 million and ended with 10 million. After that amount, everyone went quiet, so the woman asked before counting if anyone else wanted to place a bet. Miao was surprised that some stone there could be worth 10 million. Su raised his number and bet 15 million. Miao was shocked at the boy's decision. The other members began to make fun of Su, calling him a bit of a dork, but at the same time very rich. One of them said that the stone is worth 10 million at most. To himself, Su was a little disappointed that all these mortals could not even imagine that with the help of this stone of the celestial rift, which is a meteorite, a ring of time could be created. Su remembered Miao's question about what he wanted from this auction. It was this very stone. Miao already understood his intentions without explanation. He said to himself that this stone must be something unusual, but he gave no signal. As here behind them, someone placed a bet of 20 million. The woman accepted this and asked if anyone would bid higher. All the people, as in the case of Tang Xiu, began to whisper that the man was very strange and rich. The two of them just looked at each other. Su was not lost and took matters into his own hands and offered 30 million. But the old man was also targeting this stone, so his bet was 40 million. This made Su a little tense, and then he said the number of 60 million. The boy turned to the old man and waited for him to raise the bet, but he was silent, as at that time the woman was counting. At 3, one of his subordinates whispered something in his ear and he left with them. Finally looking at him again. The woman slammed the hammer on the table and announced that the stone now belonged to the handsome gentleman Tang Xiu. He got up. Now what he needed most was to answer the phone. He went out into the corridor, and it was heard from the hall that the next lot was 1,000-year-old ginseng. But Su was not interested in that. He received a call from Kang Xia about her use of a skin care recipe, so she sent a sample for testing. For further development, she applied for a patent in the name of Su. The boy asked a more rhetorical question that Ms. Kang Xia still agreed to work with him. Yes, that was true, so she would come to Xincheng the day after tomorrow. But at the expense of the company, she will bring a team with her to discuss the details when they meet. However, Su didn't have a chance to meet. He would be staying on this island for a couple of days, so he transferred her 10 million and told them to start without it. Ms. Kang Xia thanked for such trust. In order not to waste time, Su will transfer the funds right now. Kang Xia's phone received a notification of a charge of 10 million yuan. So she got up and told Andy and Mike that they were leaving for Xincheng the day after tomorrow. Su thought in his mind that he should start the company and make money as soon as possible, because he might just run out of money soon. And so he won't be able to get materials like the Sky Rift Stone. Just then Miao came out from behind him from the side of the hall. He was disappointed, because he only came here because of the 1,000-year-old ginseng. It turned out that it was bought by a very rich man who offered 300 million. Confused Miao simply did not have time to put more. Su reassured him that he had seen that ginseng. There are no thousands of years in it. Su gave a number of 50 million and it is not worth more. Miao was glad of this relief, because he had saved money. Su said that he would do his affairs now, and those affairs were the purchase of calligraphy and painting items, and the payment for the stone, and they could go from here. Miao stopped him by telling him that the Red Bud auction has one secret item per year. They save it until the last moment, so it's something. And this secret item for this year, as the woman announced, was a private island in the Pacific Ocean called Nine Dragon Island. And his minimum bid is 500 million. Su was shocked. According to his knowledge, it turned out that this area where the island was located contained the ability to easily gather universal aura and was an ideal place for cultivation. At that time in Xincheng City, Mr. Chen was meditating in his courtyard following Su's recommendations. He managed to reach a new level. After he reached perfection for the first time in 10 years, he managed to bypass the plateau. The phone on the table next to him rang. Chen picked it up and saw that it was Su. The boy needed his help. Su asked how many assets Chen currently has. He replied that he has assets worth 3 billion, but if the guy gives him time, he will be able to prepare 5 billion. How a woman's voice came from the hall about a bet in the amount of 1.5 billion. There was no time to delay, so Su said that 3 would be enough for him, and they should be transferred right now. Miao was at the auction and was mad with sadness. The woman had already started counting when one of the people offered a bet of 1.8 billion. The boy even turned back to look at this madman. At this time, Su sits next to him. Miao was very glad that he had come and told him the situation. The fat man who bought the ginseng now wants to take the ginseng for 1.8 billion. Su immediately remembered him. He was the one who had called her stupid during Qianzi. Su's phone received a message about replenishing the account by 3 billion. Miao took a look at his phone and was shocked how he was able to get such a sum so quickly. The woman began to count everything until she hit the hammer. Su raises his number and stands up to bet 2 billion for complete confidence. Everyone was shocked by him, the woman, the other participants, and the man himself. Su turned his head from behind. Instead, the fat man called him a bastard and immediately bet 2.2 billion. The guy bet 2.5 billion without any hesitation. The man started shouting that Su was bluffing and he didn't have that kind of money. Because of this, the woman even told him that if he did not have money, it would lead to bad consequences. Su assured her not to judge her by her appearance. And then, shouting to the whole hall, he asked the man if he would make a bet. The rate of 2.5 billion was already more than his budget. Su said that if no one was going to bet more, then he was waiting for the hammer blow. The woman began to count. No one had that kind of money, so the island now belongs to Tangxiu. Miao praised him for today's catch. Walking down the corridor, that man's voice rang out. He wanted to explain something to a woman named Xiao Ai. Xiao Ai was the woman in charge of the auction. The man promised that he would buy her that island, but he lost to the young man. She didn't want to see him anymore. How at this moment she sees Su, and immediately began to flatter him, whether he is free today in the evening. Xiao Ai began to ask him about where he was from, because judging by Su's accent, he was not local. And she continued to lick more and more, showering him with compliments. And at the end she asked if he had a girlfriend, and if he didn't want to let her be her. Su didn't care at all, so he bluntly and rudely told her to just leave. Approaching the fat man closer, Su quietly shared his opinion that he also had bad taste in women. He was shocked as to who this guy was. Towards the end of the day, Su came to sleep in room number 607. It was already 10 in the evening. He now had the key element to create a time ring in his hands, but he still needed the Zhenyuan flame. Therefore, Zhenyuan Viper can be useful. And Su still does not know how to manage the island. At this moment, Miao had already come to him, announcing that the bathroom was free. But Su didn't want to sit with it while Miao was here. The boy asked who he was in more detail. Miao is the head of the Haiqing Meyer family and also the president of the Miao Company. He was a cultivator. His teacher was Hui Dao, but he died 10 years ago, but he is still famous. Su was very thoughtful. Miao saw this, and asked if he knew his teacher. But Su didn't know. He doesn't know anything about their cultivation world. The boy couldn't tell right now who his master was. Miao explained that he never bailed on anyone, let alone Su, because he was his life. Now it's Tan's turn to talk about himself. He was an ordinary high school graduate, and Su plans to start his own cosmetics business with the recipes he has. Miao understood everything and offered his help. He will be happy to help. Before that, Su was leading the conversation. He needed someone who could manage the islands. We were talking about the island of 9 dragons. Miao offered instead to hire a person from a British company that dealt with these matters. But here was the problem for Su. He needed a familiar proven person, not some stranger. It turned out that that company also has a training course for such a position. So Miao told Su to call him if he found a suitable person. At this the day came to an end and they went to bed. In the morning, Su and Miao went to fishing port number 3 at 7 a.m. The ship was already in the port. Miao said that it was the largest vessel he could find on this island. But it wasn't big enough for Su, so if white sharks can reach up to 4 meters in length, then what size are those that have developed true yuan energy? However, this ship was the only option. Therefore, they rather went swimming. They were in the sea area of Jingmen Island. It was 1 o'clock in the evening. Standing on the wharf, Su could feel his spiritual qi becoming stronger and stronger. Now it became clear to him why there are such bloodthirsty animals. Miao came up behind him. He offered a drink in a can. Su assumed that with the speed of the ship they would get there in the west. With this, Miao agreed with him. During this time he would like to sleep. Su had no such plans, so he continues to walk astern. When Miao left, Su continued to praise this place with great chi power. This place was great for cultivation, so he needed to hurry if he wanted to remove the outer layer and reach the flesh growth stage. The first thing Miao saw before pretending was the ship's captain, confused. He brought him news for the boy to come out and look at his friend himself. On his behalf, Miao immediately woke up. They went out of the cabin and onto the deck. The weather changed very quickly. Miao thought that today should be sunny. In addition, the wind was very strong, which meant that a storm could soon be here. And then Miao put those problems aside and returned to what the captain was saying, something about Tang Xiu. The captain pointed a finger at the bow of the ship. What the boy saw shocked him. There sat Tang Xiu, who had assumed a meditation posture. A barrier appeared around him, protecting him from the rays from the sky. The captain reported that when Su began to light up, then the weather began to change for the worse. Miao couldn't believe how strong his friend's strength was. As a large wave hit the side of the ship, causing it to sway slightly. Miao told the captain to order the sailors to drop anchor and hide in their cabins until it was all over. Miao saw that during Su's cultivation, the vital qi dissipated into the air. He called it a waste. He walked closer to the boy and sat down next to him. This vital qi was very powerful. And Miao decided that he could absorb her. But he thanked Su in advance. At this time, Su is again in the same space in which all the planets are shooting at him with their rays of blue light. Su was able to drain so much of their energy that they eventually exploded. This was the end of cultivation. It was 7 in the evening. Su was able to reach the flesh growth stage with this cultivation. He was happy about it. Miao called from behind him and greeted him. He used our hero's chi life energy to cultivate with him and finally broke through the obstacle he had been unable to break for so long. Su noticed that this boy's understanding of chi understanding had improved, but warned him not to rush when cultivating alone. He advised Miao that building a foundation and inner strength came first. Their conversation about cultivation was interrupted by the captain showing them that they had sailed to the island. They were in the Sea of Dragons in which they hunt beasts. Su asked to bring whatever manager Tang bought in that case. All the boxes containing what Su had ordered were taken out on deck. The guy took a clerical knife in his hands and opened one of the boxes. What was there shocked Miao. In that box was a water heaven crystal. The guy didn't understand what use it was, because he was unprocessed and ordinary. Su explained that even an ordinary unprocessed natural crystal takes thousands of years to form, and this particular one retained a lot of spiritual power. All they needed was to use it correctly. Su simply took it and threw it into the water. And then he added that this material is very good for use in construction. Miao wondered if Su could make a raise. The boy did not give an exact answer, but only said that he had passed Qianzi's tactics intact and unscathed, and not only because of his inner strength. As it turned out, there are stones in other boxes that are filled with vital energy. They need to scatter them around the island before dark. They still had a lot of work to do. Miao agreed to help, but did not understand why they were doing it. First, as Su began to explain, it was a long time to wait for the beasts to appear, and with the arrays he had set up, they would help attract their attention and save a lot of time. In addition, it would be difficult for them to fight against high-level beasts in the sea, so Su decided to take them to the land, just as the evil dragon island would help. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. They were already on the island. Miao offered to switch shifts with Su because he had been watching the beast for a long time. He offered him fried chicken, as at this moment Su sensed him, he was approaching. A moment passed and now they could both see him, at least underwater, what he was doing. Miao charged with his strength. Su shouted at him not to do anything stupid and turned to him. But Miao's enthusiasm did not last long. After the beast emerged from the water, its facial expression changed to one of shock. A healthy snow-white dragon with red eyes climbed out of the water. He opened his jaws and first roared, then attacked, trying to bite Meow in half. Su managed to save his friend from the disastrous participation in time, and threw him aside on the water. It turned out that it was not a dragon at all, but a white crocodile. But he still looked more like a dragon, which is probably why this sea was called so, the Sea of Evil Dragons. Su asked Meow if he wanted to know exactly how to use the life chi he had taken from him. He began to tell that the vital chi, and absorbed chi first gather in the body, but before using the external force, it must first be restrained in order to reach the limit. Meow needed to sense all kinds of chi and combine them in his body and use them together with the external force. Now that Moya knows exactly how to use the power partially given to him by Su, use it correctly. Right now, standing against the crocodile, he is able to strike a powerful blow that he has never struck before. Meow swung, absorbing all the force into his fist and punching the throat just as the crocodile opened its jaws to bite. The boy's blow turned out not to be a blow, but a shot of a yellow beam from his hand. The force was enough to burn a hole from the throat to the skull. The crocodile was defeated. Meow couldn't believe that this was exactly what he had done with his power. But because of such a large release of power, he is overcome with pain. Su approached him from behind and told him not to move while he sealed the vital chi. Because of the great release of power, Meow almost died. He thanked his comrade for another help that saved his life. Su wanted to look at the beast as soon as possible to see if it had the true yuan. Putting his hand on the beast, Su was shocked. He did not have a true yuan, but in theory there should be. His thoughts are interrupted by someone's tail swing. Su pushed Meow away again, and he took the blow with his tail. Meow flew away and hit the water, stroked his head, and then looked at who was waving his tail and was shocked. It was a huge black crocodile. It already looked a lot like a dragon. Meow could not find Su with his eyes, but began to worry badly. The boy made a big hand with the help of vital chi and lifted the crocodile by the tail. Now Su understood what it was. The true yuan of the white crocodile was in black. The beast roared loudly, and the boy at that time pushed him away. He was at the peak of his power. Su was all ablaze with blue flames, and his eyes glowed the same color. He used his hands like large knives and decapitated the crocodile with 2 swings of the blades. Su stood with his back to the beast, because cool guys don't look back. And then he still turned to look at the fruit of his work. Meow was surprised that his comrade had taken down such a beast with a single blow, even though he had done the same a couple of minutes ago. After an hour passed, the workers began tying up the crocodile under Su's orders. And the white one had already been sent on the ship. The boy gave Meow his well-deserved true yuan, and recommended that he use it as soon as he reached the next level. Meow did not understand what Su meant. It turned out that Tang was afraid that with the current level, the true yuan might cause damage or simply dissolve. Meow couldn't take this one. He needed the true white crocodile bath. Su told him not to say that. All the remaining cysts would go to him. Meow appreciated his friend's help and invited him to rest in the palace. But Su did not want to go into blackout so quickly. First it was necessary to collect the skin of a black crocodile. Meow couldn't understand, because this place was supposed to be full of wild beasts. The beasts were still here, but they must all look like a great white shark. The 2 crocodiles they caught were the strongest here. It didn't make sense for Su to stay here and hunt low-level beasts. The boy showed his friend to the sea. There were crocodiles, but they were very small. They turned out to be the children of those 2. Without parental support, they lost the courage to attack. Su wanted to finish at this point and go to the ship and rest. Meow made this decision, looked back and clapped his hands in a thank you gesture. The next day, Meow and Su stood at the port and said goodbye. Miao said that Boss Tang would send the crocodile bones and white shark bones to Xincheng. Su still had plans to go to the local market and return to his hometown the day after tomorrow. He promised to give his help if Miao needed it. Tovarish reciprocated and gave him the keys to his car so that the road would be comfortable. And when Xiao leaves, he should leave mountain gorges on the streets. It turned out that Tang Xiao does not know how to drive, so it was decided to call a taxi. Su told the driver to go to the Chinese herbal market, then looked out the window and thought about the fact that he needed to learn how to drive. There were many vendors and people at the Jingmen Island herb market. Everyone shouted what they were selling. When Su was patted on the shoulder by a man, he offered the help of a guide and porter, not for free, of course. Su asked if he knew all the shops here. This is how he knew, and he does not work for some store there, but for himself, so he assured that he would not interfere with purchases. Something Su needed such help, so he gave 1,000 yuan, and then asked which shop had rare medicinal herbs. The man pointed to the right side of his hand. But Su had to negotiate with the owner, because such herbs do not lie in the window. They entered the doorway and the man asked the salesman if the boss was here now. No, he wasn't here, he went downtown, so the mercenary told Su that he would leave for a while and look for the shop owner. But he did not have time to leave, when a pleading voice sounded behind them, begging to save her daughter. A mother was standing in the audience, and her daughter was sitting on a chair. Su wondered what the matter was it a beggar? It wasn't like that at all. The man said that the child fell ill with a very unusual disease. Her mother dragged her around all the hospitals in the country and nothing changed. That is why she sometimes comes here, because it is in this market that there may be professional doctors who come here to buy medicinal herbs. And the one who cures her daughter will receive all her property. The tenant added that for more than 2 years, no one could do anything to ease her pain. The mother announced that she has 300,000, and they will go to the one who cures her daughter, and she will do whatever she wants and repented of her name, Mu Qingping. Su looked at the girl and saw how she was in pain and most of all she had a high fever. He couldn't just look at it, even though Su was very serious and sometimes cruel all this time, there was pure kindness inside him. He ordered the man to wait for him from the stage. But Su didn't have time to get there first, an old man named Siyu Guotsuan did it. He must have been a doctor if he volunteered to help. The woman, of course, thanked him for calling for help. He touched her forearm and pulled back. The woman asked him what it was. He managed to find the cause of her daughter's illness. She was born with a body of 1,000 heavenly needles and a secret ice vein. This kind of physical problem Mr. Chu could not cure, but there was one hope. Maybe his master could do it. Mu asked who his master was. He was a ghost healer of God. The problem was that he didn't have a constant and exact location, and so he can contact him through 2 places. All the people below the stage rejoiced that the girl would be cured and marveled at the master doctor. How Su extended his hand now, he had already wasted a lot of time thinking. Everyone was surprised, because Su appeared next to the girl very quickly and no one noticed it. After the analysis, everything was as the guy thought. Su said the girl would die in a month. She and the doctor were surprised. And then Mr. Chu was indignant at who Xiao imagined himself to be. After all, the master will try his best to save the sick child. Su told mother that he could heal the girl. Whether she believed him or not, she had to give him a chance. He looks at her with a corrosive look, and Mu still agreed. Mr. Chu wanted to see the result of his work. Su asked for a pen and paper. The boy wrote on paper a recipe for herbal medicine, as well as tools that would be useful in preparing the medicine. And finally, Su calculated that Mu would not have enough 3,000, so he gave her his card. The woman could not accept such a gift, because they had just met. Su yelled at her for that, they didn't have time to sort out principles. As the old man called here under the stage, This man was just the owner of the shop that Sue went to for rare medicinal herbs. Sue wanted to know the man's condition. The condition was very strange. The guy must cure the girl's illness. In a bad case he will have to pay the full amount of money. The old man felt sorry for them, even though he was a businessman. This event will be a good cause and good publicity for him. Sue agreed to the condition, but added that if he failed to cure the girl, he would pay 10 times more for the herbs, but he had one request. At that time, Ms. Lulu was also at the herbal market, talking on the phone with Chu-yi. She shared with him that she had run out of personal care products. That is why she went to the market to buy medicinal herbs. Hanging up, she heard a voice coming from the stage in front of her. She looked closely at those on the stage and saw a familiar face. It was Sue. She was angry because he refused to have dinner with her, saying that he had urgent business in Xinjiang. She did not like lies, but began to calmly see what he would do. The man was interested in what Sue would ask him. The boy's medication was not very good, because it only treated the symptoms, not the original problem. Sue needed more material to process the medicine. If the old man can get him 100-year-old snow lotus, he will use its medicine to save the girl. And in case of failure, pay 10 times more. The old man laughed at this, and then added that Sue should think carefully, because 100-year-old snow lotus will eat at least 7 figures. The boy was very happy about it. He without unnecessary words advanced the recipe of herbs and devices to the man so that he would take everything he needed. After that, Mu wanted to say some words to Sue, but he cut her off saying that he knew what she wanted to tell him, but it would all be after her daughter was cured. 20 minutes have passed. The old man took everything on Sue's list. The herbs still had to be prepared, and their preparation, the man said, would take another 6 hours of their time. Sue glanced at him from behind, then used his inner strength and sped up the cooking process. All three were surprised. Mr. Chu remembered that his teacher had once told him that people who practiced cultivation and had a great level of skill would use their internal strength and vital qi to improve medicine. And then he assumed that Sue was a great master. The medicine was almost finished. After cooking, Sue put some in a bowl and warned that there might be a strong reaction afterwards. In this case, there is no need to panic. Then he raised the bowl and began to pour the medicine down her throat with his own hands. After taking the medicine, everything was fine at first. The girl looked different and could already speak. But after her mother's words about how she felt, her body suddenly began to ache. Sue ordered her to hold on, because through this suffering she would be freed from the shackles of the disease. The girl agreed, she will hold on. The boy praised her for this. The time allotted for the medicine to work has passed. Now Sue rushed to help them. He used his power to place his hands on her back. The girl began to scream loudly. The boy thought that everything was already lost. But after all this, the girl opened her eyes and after her mother's words, she felt herself, stood up. She was completely different. Healthy, energetic, she felt good. Mu asked Een if she was really healthy. The girl no longer felt that pain. The woman could not even muster words of gratitude for saving her daughter. All Sue wanted was for them to stay here. He needed to say something to them after buying up all the herbs in the market. Een herself thanked Sue on her own behalf. Now it was the old man's turn. He was the 5th master. Sue asked him if he had brought him the 100-year-old snow lotus that he had promised. The old man was a man of his word, so these words offended him a little. They went to a shop where Sue wanted to buy some herbs from him. Before going to the store, he is asked by Mr. Chu about his name, but sometimes he does not know the master. Sue didn't know the master, but he thought that he had taught Mr. Chu not to judge people by their appearance. All the people who watched this spectacle praised him, calling a real hero, an angel from heaven. Lulu was standing in the crowd of these people. She had no comments. The mercenary loaded the last box of medicinal herbs. But he offered his help in finding a taxi. Miss Lulu's voice called out from behind Sue. She was outraged by his lie, but then quickly changed her emotional state. But the second time she offered him to eat together. Sue once again twisted his physiognomy in a very strange way, as was the case with Meow. Lulu was a little shocked by his reaction. But now the boy's important task was to talk with Moo and Een. He asked her for help. And she, looking at him, admired his beauty, and thought that how could she again offer him dinner together. Sue brought her back to the ground. Lulu said it didn't really matter. But as a sign of her help, she gave him the keys to her car so that he could drive himself, because she does not want to be his chauffeur. But as we remember, Sue does not know how to drive a car. Lulu felt jealous that Sue had finally found a worthy opponent. After half an hour, Lulu brought them to one of her free villas and let them stay as long as needed and gave them the keys. And then she asked Sue what was going on with their dinner. The guy didn't promise her that. Therefore, she was again indignant at such an answer. How could he refuse her, even when she brought them here and gave them a villa? Sue said that then on the cruise ship, his pond and Yifutai should have helped her increase her profits. So he didn't owe her anything, and he hurriedly went to the villa and said goodbye to her. She wanted to say something to him, but the door was already closed. She called Tang Xiu a bastard. They were sitting in the guest room. Een was not very interested, so she ran to play in the garden. Sue wanted Miss Moo to describe her situation and who she was. Her husband started a small business in the past and everything was going great, but 5 years ago he got into a car accident. It was at that time that the daughter fell ill with a strange disease. Miss Moo then spent all the money on treatment, which did not change anything, and then she wanted to give up. But luckily, Tang Xiu came to her. She didn't know how to thank him, so she offered the 300,000. The guy refused. He didn't need her money. This conversation was not about this topic at all. What Sue is going to tell her may seem very strange to Miss Moo. He asked her if she believed in the existence of cultivators. It was 2 hours later. Miss Lulu was talking on the phone. She was saying that she didn't like one freak. And at that moment, 3 men approached her. Lulu dropped her phone. The same conversation was taking place in the same hall. Sue shared with her that there were cultivators and he was one of them. That was why he could control Een disease. The boy knew cultivation methods that allowed to cure the disease and save the person. Miss Moo will be confused as to whether her daughter still has the disease. It won't be wrong. Sue said that Een was not really sick. Her physical problems are the reason why she is often in a lot of pain. Only thanks to the 9 Heavens Ice Phoenix body technique. Cultivating meridians can work smoothly in the body, achieving a balanced yin-yang. If not in time, Een will again fall into the abyss of pain and suffering and eventually die. Now Sue can only temporarily control the yin-yang in her body. In order for the girl to survive, she needs cultivation. She must become a cultivator. Sue wanted to take her as his apprentice and save her life. That was the reason for the conversation. Miss Moo must give permission for this. They went outside to the kindergarten, where Een was playing at that moment. The girl calls Sue her big brother. She shared that there are a lot of beautiful flowers in this place. Sue shared with her that in addition to healing people, he has magic. But he offered her to look at her. The girl wanted to look at it. So Sue showed her the stone. But he used his inner strength. Having released a beam from his hand, which broke the stones into pieces. Both were surprised. Een immediately rushed to Sue with a request to teach her magic. The boy would gladly do it, but the girl was small, so he needed the mother's permission. Een promised that she would listen to her mother's words. Miss Moo allowed her to do this, but she must take it seriously. Een was over the moon with happiness, and Miss Moo thanked Sue once again. The boy will be going back to Sinchon tomorrow, so he is taking these 2 with him. Miss Mu began again that she did not know how to thank him. Su omitted these words, because he is a master, it is his duty. And then I asked her to prepare tea, because they were waiting for some bowing procedures. And then he added that she should also bring something to eat. Meanwhile, after half an hour in the moonlight in the rooms of the house, men shared their problems. The fat man said that he had been kicked out of the VIP room by the Bai Yen Hotel, and that a guy had snatched an island from under his nose at an auction that he wanted to give to his girlfriend. There was also a fifth master of the herb market in that company. He said that he had lost the ice snow lotus to one young man. The fat man was disappointed that he lost his girlfriend, because he spent a lot of money on her. The master reassured her, saying that the old goes away as well as the new, and offered to drink after that they would definitely be happy. On their way down the hall, they spot Miss Lulu. That's what was new. Master nudged her with his shoulder. The old man began to climb up to her with his hands, for which he received a strong slap on the cheek. He even called her a smelly girl. Lulu was surprised by this attitude towards her. They probably don't know who she is. A voice could be heard from the phone that fell, whether everything is in order. Lulu did not manage to pick it up in time and her phone was crushed by her foot. She asked what they needed, but got a question in return and a knife in the hands of another man. The same caller was Gu. The phone no longer had a network with her, and she thought that something had happened to her. Therefore, I ordered one employee to take the food to the KTV right now. And then she realizes that the guy Lulu was talking about is now in a villa near the sea, so he is much closer to the KTV, and dials Tang Xiu. The diners sat at the table full of food. Miss Mu asked that even if they didn't have that lotus, their daughter could still be cured by cultivating with Su. The guy just doesn't like that, so he got on the old man's nerves a little. And Su also shared that he managed to prepare medicine from the lotus, which he got for free. Miss Mu understood everything, and then offered to evaluate the taste of her cooking skills. Su praised her dishes. Ian told Su to eat more chicken legs. The boy patted her head and told her that there was much more to come in her cultivation. But he asked her to work with all her might. While they were having dinner, Su's phone started ringing. It was Gu Xiaoxue. She asked the guy if he knew a girl named Lulu. He did, so he asked what happened. And then after hearing that, he asked what address. Meanwhile, Miss Lulu was treated less politely and gentlemanly by the men. She screamed to be let go. The master thought to invite her for a drink first and then slowly move on to the business, but her slap on the cheek accelerated the business, and that is why the men are moving on to her now. The old man said that he had gained the upper hand on this island and therefore he did not need to fear who Lulu was in terms of status. Just then a staff rushes into the room, who informs that Boss Gu has been informed of the problem and that she will rush here. The old man ordered his subordinates to show them a lesson. The master's boys were really stout fellows, and the persona was much inferior to them. The old man ordered them to beat them, but he could not pass. Just then Su appeared behind the staff and told them to move away. One of the old man's subordinates rushed to punch Su in the head. But he greatly underestimated him. The boy repelled the attack with a simple pin, which led to a broken arm. The scoundrel began to cry out in pain, which is not surprising. Everyone was amazed by this sight. After the first one, a big man rushed into battle. He was already smarter, so he took a knife in his hands. But this in no way saves him from a disastrous participation and he successfully flies into the wall, losing his knife. Both were almost eliminated. He gave the first one a final blow on the back of the head, which caused him to fall to the floor. Su tore off his jacket and gave it to Lula to cover herself with. Su was much taller than the fat man and the market master. He simply took them by the clothes and threatened to make a condition, either they make compensation or lie in the hospital for 6 months with injuries. Miss Lulu, although she was a little unfriendly to him after his refusals, was already all the same admiring him. The condition was that they were on their knees singing a song in front of Miss Lulu. Of course, such antics were not without beatings on the face. Now it's time for the girl to make fun of them. Sue has had enough of watching this circus, so he will leave here first. Lulu wanted to say something to the boy, so she asked him to wait. He almost reached the front door when a man opened it very abruptly. He was Lulu's brother, and Gu was behind him. He notices that the two men were locked out. And then the old man calls out asking if Miss Lulu is his sister. The girl got up from the sofa and complained to her brother that the two fat men were making fun of her. The master knelt down and began to beg for forgiveness, because they did not know that she was his sister. Because of their cooperation, Mr. Oyen might have forgiven their prank, but not the abuse of his sister. He ordered his boys to take the scoundrels and bring them to the warehouse at the wharf. The fat man shirked the responsibility that he was just passing by and he didn't know the man from the market. Mr. Ouyang approached Sue and asked if he was also involved. Lulu said he saved her. Here Gu comes and says that she called him, because he was much closer to her. The brother couldn't believe that Sue was able to put down two of the old man's bodyguards, because he had heard that one of them could fight against 10 people. Lulu confirmed that he had scattered them himself. Sue had no time to waste, so he was going to go first. Oyen stopped him, because such a feat required them to sit down at the same table and pour a few glasses. But Sue had no such plans. Finally, he asked Ms. Gu about her teacher to contact him if she made up her mind. Sue told Lulu to go with him. At this time she did not understand how he could be familiar with Xiaoxue. And then pulls Sue out of his thoughts. They went back to the villa by the sea. So a dinner prepared by Miss Mu was waiting for them. Lulu was impressed by the skill of cooking. They were amazingly delicious for her, that the girl could not stop eating. It was time for the woman to go to bed, so she took Ian with her and told them to leave the dirty dishes on the table, and she would wash them tomorrow. And finally she wished good night. Sue was also determined to go to bed, so he got up from the table and told Lulu that they would meet tomorrow. She asked him to wait, she had something to tell him, but as she hurriedly got up from the table, she caught her foot on the leg of the table and flew straight at Sue. The guy managed to turn around and catch her. For a while, they gazed into each other's gaze. Sue took her wrist. As it turned out, when she was abused, she was injured. There was a large bruise on her forearm. Sue told her to take off her jacket and lie down on the bed. She was surprised by this. Lulu asked him what he wanted to do to her. Sue wanted to massage her bruises, but if she doesn't want to, he goes to bed. Lulu asked him to wait, explained that she did not understand the boy's charitable intentions at first. She lay down on her stomach, and again began to carry nonsense that he would not give her a massage at all. Sue turned away from this and went to sleep. The girl ordered him to return. He returned, but said that if he heard such words again, he would leave. He got to work. Lulu was pleased, she didn't think he knew such a technique. Lying on her back, the girl complimented Sue that his jacket looked very nice on him. The guy said she could take it for herself. Blushing, Lulu timidly asked Sue if he would ever come to the island again. However, it makes a lot of sense for him to see each other again. Lulu stood up a little and said that she liked him. Sue passed these words between his ears, and wished her a good night. The girl ran up to him from behind and asked if he wanted to be her boyfriend. Sue put his hand behind her neck without saying a word. Lulu thought it was a sign and now they were going to kiss. But it was not like that at all. Sue felt the point on the back of the head and the girl fell asleep. He covered her with his jacket and left. At 11 a.m. the next day, Sue and his passengers arrived at the villa. From today, Miss Mu and Ian will live together with him. Sue will look for a school for the girl, and Miss Mu will be a contracted housekeeper and things will be on her. The guy also gave her a card with 500,000 yuan on it, and said that she could buy everything she needed. And if this is not enough, then they can ask for more. In addition to this, Miss Mu will be paid a salary every month. Su needed to do something, so he leaves the family and promises to return at dinner. Miss Mu promises him a delicious dinner. The guy gets into a taxi and goes to a warehouse on the northern edge of the new district. And then he calls someone who will be there soon. In the warehouse, the foremen were managed by an old acquaintance whom Su had arranged to help his mother. He was glad to see Tan. He reported that the materials that had been sent from the island had arrived and there were 4 shark skeletons and 2 remains from crocodiles. Su ordered that all these be brought to his villa afterwards. And then he asked if something had happened to the restaurant during that time. The guy said no, but a couple of times Su Xiang came and wanted to see Su, but they chased him away each time. Su said that if he came again, he should call him immediately. And at that moment, Kang Xia drives up to them in a white car. She apologized for not calling. She got out of the car, followed by her 2 companions. Kang Xia extended her hand to him. Su shook her hand, saying that he wished their cooperation great success. At the same time, Miss Lulu woke up in her villa where Su had put her. The first word was his name. Su left a note in which only one word was written, "Goodbye." Lulu called him a freak again. Kang Xia chose a location for the company in the central business district of Xinshan City. Su liked it. The girl said she would call Chen from Baidu and talk about the production of their products. Although Su allowed Kang Xia to run the company and make decisions by herself, she wanted to hear his approval on the company name. The girl gave Su a business card on which the logo could be read as Big Tang. Su found it interesting. He even compared it to the Tang dynasty. They can use this name temporarily. Now it was time for Kang Xia to introduce her team to the boy. The first person Kang Xia introduced was a beautiful blonde, her assistant. She was responsible for the work of calls, conversations, and negotiations. Andy embarrassed Kang Xiao a bit, because Xiao was handsome and that's why she accepted his proposal. The manager told her not to carry nonsense. And the second was Mike. He was responsible for advertising and selling products. Mike looked very carefully at Su, but he brought him back down to earth by asking why he was looking at him like that. The man asked if he had ever been a model. Mike had a great idea. Even though their products were aimed at women, Su could be the face of the company because his beauty was unmatched. Except for this guy, no one knew, and that would add to the charm. Su apologized, but in this he refuses to work. In his opinion, it is better to find an experienced person. But Mike still stood his ground. With the help of the guy's appearance, their company would go to the top. He felt it in his gut. Even Andy broke into their conversation and agreed too. Su wanted to hear Kang Xia's opinion on this idea. Her answer was also positive. Why not try SU? The boy agreed, but would make a final decision after seeing the plan. Su was glad to see the team here. His goal was much higher than to make his products popular. But to begin with, they need to set a small goal in front of themselves. Take first place in China. It was 10 minutes later. Andy and Mike argued about which dish is the most famous in Xinjiang. The girl was for small buns, and the man for a hot pot. Behind them were Su and Kang Xia. The guy transferred the money to her and told her that if she needed more, she should ask, but not to spend money left and right, because now he has a big debt. Kang Xia became curious about how much money VII should return and to whom exactly. She just fell into the ground when she heard that Su owed 3 billion Chen from the Baidu company that helps them with products. The boy reassured her, because Chen is his student, and he will not demand money quickly. Kang Xia still hasn't moved away from the sum, as here Su says that he is someone's teacher. She was wondering what exactly he was teaching. Su couldn't answer her right now, maybe later. The boy had business at his villa, so he needed to hurry, and at the end he asked for one request, to teach him to drive a car. Sue wanted to get his driver's license after his college entrance exams. His partners gladly saw him off and said goodbye. Sue got into the taxi and thought about his plan for tomorrow. After all, he had to go back to school later. Before that, he wanted to visit home and see his mother. The driver took him where he needed, for which the guy gave him 35 yuan. When he got out of the taxi, he noticed Long and Miss Mu standing at the entrance of his villa, who did not let anyone in without Sue's permission. The woman told him to call, but he did and it was unsuccessful. At this time, Sue himself intervened in their dialogue and asked Long why he was here. Miss Mu made coffee and brought cookies. She was apologizing to Long for that attitude a couple of minutes ago. The woman said she would leave soon and they could be alone and start a conversation. Long praised the housekeeper and Sue's right choice. The guy, in turn, thanked him and asked him here. Long was here for 2 reasons. He asked Sue if he remembered the project he won for them. Yes, he remembered Zaishanping village. Sue made a great design and Long presented it to his partner a few days ago. They are all there and Long thinks that no one will do better than Tan. Therefore, Long wants to do a joint project. Now he has 5 billion yuan in his hands for its development. Sue is given 10% to begin with. And the more money the company has, the more the boy will have. It was attractive to Sue, but Long had to spend 500 million and more to buy his design. Long wanted to make Zaishanping a familiar complex to China or even the whole world. That's why it needs a better design. Sue agreed, but he wanted to design a better design, so the money would be increased in the future. Long will have to be ready for that. He assured him not to worry, because one of their partners is the son of the famous Tang family. Sue immediately guessed who it was. It was Chu Yi, but his surname was not Tang. It turned out that he was the son of a daughter of the Tang family, and therefore he had a different surname. Long remembered that he had made a bet with Chu Yi that Sue would win. And now Long got 2% of the shares of the Zaishanping project, and then added that the guy now admires Sue very much. The boy of course praised Chu Yi for being a good partner, but rather wanted to hear the second reason for Long's appearance. It was hard to tell him. Long's brother Zhenling was to blame for this. Entrance exams are coming up and he still plays every day. Sue told him not to worry because he was going back to school the day after tomorrow and would help him with his studies. Long invited him to have a drink at his restaurant to celebrate Sue's return. However, the boy is a very busy person and refuses because he has business at dinner tonight. When Long was already sitting in his limousine, Sue shared the news that Kong Xia had already prepared to manufacture the products and she would soon send the stock ownership certificate. At this point they said their goodbyes and Long left. At this moment, Ian ran up to Sue. She wanted to practice with the teacher, so she rather wanted to start, even now. Sue couldn't refuse her. Ian was happy about it. Half an hour of training has passed. The girl was just using force, and instead one had to feel the flow of qi in the body. Sue reminded her of the power he injected into her body when he healed her. Sue told her not to worry, that everything would not work out at once. It also took him a long time to learn about vital qi. However, the boy had to go on business. He ordered her to train, but not for long. And only after opening the door, Ian called him. Sue was amazed at what he saw. Ian held the same qi in her hands. The boy was confused that how in less than an hour the girl was able to master the vital qi. In fact, it took him more time. With such a shocked expression on her face, Ian was a little confused and thought that she had done something wrong again. But everything was right. Sue took her in his arms and praised her, because she now had qi in her hands. Ian wanted to know what she should do next. Now she needed to get her qi together and control it. The girl understood everything, so she started working right away. And at this time, Sue fell into thinking that with such achievements, Ian could surpass him. Sue walked into the middle of the villa while Miss Mu was cleaning. He asked her where she put the boxes she received today. She put those boxes in the warehouse next to the shark and crocodile bones. Sue will be there and ordered Miss Moo not to go anywhere, not to be crowded. The boy should have hurried up his training to advance to the next realm now. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. In the garage of his villa, Sue was again boiling a cauldron of some substance, this time it was blue in color. Poured into it were 3 vials of nutrients, 1 shark skeleton, and 1 box of high-quality herbs that Jin Yuan had previously obtained from the beast. All these ingredients should be enough to prepare the golden substance.
If you have watched up to this point, then I am very grateful to you, because this is where the video ends. If it's not difficult for you, then like this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to continue this story, then write in the comments. Thank you all, I love you all.